countdown and then you go loud when countdown.
Hi everyone, I'm Sadaf Khalid, the host for the second day of COP28, which is happening in Dubai. I have my dear friend colleague Collins all the way joining from Kenya, Nairobi. Hi Collins, how are you doing?
Hi, Sadaf. Doing well here in Nairobi and glad to have you today for our second uh, day.
So,
Thank you.
what was your takeaways? We had a very interesting sessions yesterday, all the way from Greece to Sunita Gandhi in India. So, what was your takeaway and how was your experience? Because I believe it's your first experience for the virtual COP28. What were your takeaways, Collins?
Yeah, indeed, there's very inspiring comments and discussions from different groups, particularly two. We had Sunita Gandhi from India, and she mentioned about this education and the aspect of collaboration and not competition. Something that I feel we can take it across even our climate action, that we indeed have to endear our children to understand collaboration in education. And then second part, we had a session on prayer and meditation from Kat, and he said, peace is everything, peace, love. And in Kenya, we normally say it, peace, love, and unity, and bring that aspect in the midst of the crisis. For me, it was my takeaway yesterday. Thank you.
I really enjoyed the opening session. I mean, hearing conversations globally, even when I was logged off, I was like up till 3 a.m. listening to Inger. The guest from Peru was very interesting after Rob's discussion on Amazon forest and tree plantation. That was brilliant, my co host Inger, hearing the conversation. So, I mean, I'm very excited about this whole campaign that we are running. It's for you, it's for me, it's for everyone. And I think the slogan that we have, COP28, is not only in Dubai, it's in your home, in your cities, in your communities. So stay tuned for live updates. Anybody can join this platform. We have a sign up form. Just ask questions and share your wonderful stories with us. So, before we kick off our second day live session, I would like to play the amazing video of the kickoff which Inger Met has created. Let's see that. So that was the countdown video. So today we'll be having our guest joining from all the way from Islamabad, Pakistan, Dr. Basharat Hassan, who will be talking about renewable energy projects, how he was involved, what success stories Pakistan is working on, wind bins, solar power, hydro projects all across and sharing his story. So, Collins, I want to, before I play his video, I want to hear the viewers how Kenya is progressing on renewable project and renewable energy projects. We're talking about fossil fuels, where our slogan is to put a hard limit to oil, coal, and gas, carbon emissions. So, just for brief discussions, I want to hear your thoughts. What is Kenya? What is the African region doing as far as the renewable energy is concerned?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sadaf. Interesting discussion indeed. If you recall yesterday, in one of our discussions, actually, brother team had a very interesting discussion with one of guy of an entrepreneur working into the renewable energy sector. And indeed, it's true. I could say Kenya is making tremendous steps into green energy, the harnessing of wind, solar and geothermal. And I think with the discussions going around globally, I would say that this is in the right direction on how we can actually transition in a very good way to make sure that we actually take care of our planet. So I'm looking forward to also hear what's the experience from Pakistan, and I think it's interesting to get to understand what's happening around globally. I've never been to Pakistan, but you know, looking forward to get to engage and learn.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Like, I would love to invite you to Pakistan and visit our beautiful country. And same, I haven't been to Nairobi, Kenya, because I'm into tourism and traveling. I would love to visit Kenya, Nairobi, and experience the Masai Safari that I've heard so much about it.
You're so much welcome, Sadaf. Yeah.
The more excited thing that I like about is, the video that you made about the indigenous community, because I met a few of the indigenous communities when I attended COP26 in Glasgow.
Okay. Okay.
So I would like to, because when I go to a new country, I always try to meet new people, know about their culture, what do they eat, what music do they like. It's a great learning experience. I always say traveling is an education. It horizon your education aspect. You learn so much knowledge sharing. So coming back to renewable energy, I'm going to play the intro video for our distinguished guest, Dr. Bashar. That was brilliant video which my colleague Inger Met has created. Now let's welcome our distinguished guest, Dr. Basharat, who's joining us from Islamabad, Pakistan. And I hope for the viewers it will be an interesting discussion when we talk about renewable energy and carbon emissions. This year, from 1st to 12th December. I welcome Dr. Basharat, who is a PhD in renewable energy and environmental specialist. He has got a huge knowledge, wealth of expertise, and proven a track record to the forecast. His dedication to addressing pressing environmental challenges, coupled with his innovative solutions, positions him as a true pioneer in the pursuit of a clean, sustainable future. Hello, Dr. Basharat, and welcome to the It's For You campaign, which we are running for the 12 days of COP28.
Hi, thank you very much for the introduction. I am basically a civil engineer. I've specialized in environmental engineering and alternative and renewable energy from Newcastle upon Tyne, the University of Newcastle upon Tyne in the UK. I joined Capital Development Authority, Islamabad, after doing my master's and PhD, and worked in the Environmental Protection Department. And later, I was selected by the higher authorities as board member of the newly created, at that time, Alternative Energy Development Board. So this board was created to give a one window facility to all the alternative energy investments in Pakistan. It was created to implement policies, programs, and projects through private sector in the field of alternative energy, and to assist and facilitate development and generation of alternative energy to achieve sustainable economic growth, and to encourage transfer of technology from abroad and develop indigenous manufacturing base for alternative and renewable energy technology, to promote provision of energy services that are based on alternative energy resources, and setting up of alternative and renewable energy projects on its own or through joint ventures or partnerships with public or private entities. Recently, the government of Pakistan has decided that 60% of total national power generation capacity would be generated through renewable energy technologies by the year 2030. In addition, under the Remote Village Electrification Program was directed to electrify 7,874 remote villages in Sindh and Balochistan provinces through these alternative and renewable energy technologies, because those villages were very far away from the national grid. It was very difficult to connect them with the national grid.
May I ask, Dr. Bhaskaran, then, are these sort of like off-grid technologies that's being developed?
For the villages, remote villages, yes, they were off-grid technologies, but our main projects were on-grid, which were, I'll show you later, which were solar, wind, biomass, waste to energy, biogas, biofuels, etc. They are all on-grid projects.
Okay, and of the 60% that needs to go and be switched over into renewable energy, what's the percentage at the moment? Are you starting from zero, or are we starting from like 30% or something?
Right, we started from zero in 2006. You see, we have almost 5% of alternative energy at the moment. Now, first of all, when I joined the Alternative Energy Development Board as board member, we didn't have any data available. So what we did was through US NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratories of the USA, we carried out resource mapping through satellite for wind and solar.
Yep. This is to understand how much sun and how much wind different regions are getting.
Yes, wind and sun, as well as the, later with World Bank and ESMAP, we carried out resource mapping for biomass, and through GIZ, the German organization, we did resource mapping for hydro. Okay. So these maps you can see on the right is on the top is a wind map, and on the bottom is the solar map for Pakistan. 50,000 megawatts could be produced just from one wind corridor, which is near Karachi. You can see at the bottom. Can you see my cursor? Yes. Or
okay. So this around here, would that be right?
Yeah.
Yes. So that's actually quite a nice part here.
And anything very close to the grid as well. So we started developing this wind corridor first.
Yep.
So we were told, we were given the statistics that we have about 340,000 megawatts of wind energy potential all over Pakistan, and just 50,000 in this corridor, which you just identified.
And is wind is not one of these technologies that is favorable to a mid-sized grid or an off-grid in that sense? So,
off-grid, yes, you can have micro wind turbines, but we were more interested in large turbines. And wind farms were established 50 megawatt each, and private sector came and they got our LOIs and started developing wind power plants, wind parks in that corridor at the bottom, where we have about 50,000 megawatts potential. Then with the solar, we were told that 2.9 million megawatts could be produced. Now, let me tell you that Pakistan's requirement in winter is just 7,000 to 8,000 megawatts. And in summer, it enhances to 23,000 megawatts to 25,000 megawatts because of the use of air conditioning.
Yes.
So just from wind, you can have 340,000 megawatts, and from solar, 2.9 million megawatts. If we develop these two sectors only, we can, give electricity to other neighboring countries as well, not only Pakistan.
Yes.
Go on.
And the solar is pretty much everywhere, right? I guess the yellow is also quite intense already. So by the time you get
solar is pretty much everywhere, and it's available almost 320 days a year.
Okay, wow, that's very expensive. Yeah.
So I mean, it is very easy, and solar can also be, and it is being used for off-grid, energy as well. It is easier, much easier.
And the one question people often ask about, renewable energy is how do you do with the intermittency? So how do you think in terms of the storage of the energy potential to buffer the times when, clouds and other things may be in the way?
Yeah, what we do is we just give all this to the national grid. National grid has, an energy mix of different types of energy sources, like from nuclear, from thermal, from coal, from biomass, from waste to energy, from all other sources. So when you have an energy mix of different sources, which you can get 24 hours, so it doesn't matter. And then we also, modified the grid code to take all these renewable energies. So for hydel, we were told, and various feasibility studies were carried out by GAZ, that 3,000 megawatts was the potential from canals and rivers, and 50,000 megawatts is the potential from, it's a large hydel potential where we can build dams as well. Right.
And and the principal source of the water, is that from the mountains runoffs, or is that from rain that would be coming?
Both I would say. Yeah, mostly from the mountains, when the glaciers melt, or when there's a lot of snow, snow melts, so the water goes to the rivers. And also from India, we get, water from the rivers. So that's the main source. And then bagasse and biomass. You see, the bagasse is the, when you crush the sugarcane in sugar mills, so the leftover is called bagasse. So that is a biomass. It's a very good source of energy. And also liquid waste from sugar mills. So Pakistan has about 105 large sugar mills. 85 of them are operating at the moment. So from just the the sugar mills, we can have 5,000 megawatts of energy. And from waste, you see, Pakistan generates about 70,000 tons of waste every year. So it's a huge source, both the solid waste as well as the liquid waste. So from the solid waste, you can convert it easily into energy through incinerators or other technologies from landfills. And from the liquid waste, which is wastewater, domestic wastewater, you can have you can get methane from its decomposition, which is like natural gas. You can have you can convert it into electricity, and you get very good quality of organic fertilizer. And the water is recycled back to the city to be used, in irrigation or for other purposes. So waste is a resource, and it must not be wasted. So we started various waste to energy, programs in Pakistan. And then geothermal is also a source, but unfortunately we couldn't tap this resource. And then we moved to alternative fuels, different alternative fuels like RDF, which is called refuse derived fuel. In Gateshead, which is near Newcastle upon Tyne, there was a facility there on making RDF. So I took that technology, brought it back to Pakistan, and we implemented various RDF projects. And the RDF was provided to the cement factories, because in cement factories, they use imported coal. So it was replaced with refuse derived fuel, which is, in the form of pellets.
And so in terms of the, the kind of the industrial activities and so on, where is the sort of, you obviously have the urban centers, which are generally very often the intense energy users, especially in the summer when temperatures get hot and air conditioning ramp up and so on. And as you mentioned, cement making. What other areas is the demand for the energy coming from?
The industry requires energy, both electricity as well as gas.
Yep.
Nearly all the industry requires that. So mostly the natural gas used to be provided to the industry, but those reserves are depleting at the moment.
Yep.
So we may not have that much gas available in, say, next 5 years, which we can provide to the industry. Industry not only uses gas for for heating purposes, but like fertilizer industry uses it as a raw material to
Yes.
make fertilizer, artificial fertilizer.
Yeah.
So we have to provide them with alternative sources like syngas, which also comes from the waste.
Yes. Okay. So all that drives that along. I mean, purely on pure energy terms, these numbers here look like you more than satisfy any potential need, especially from the solar side, right?
Yeah, we have a lot, and then you see, we also started the net metering program. Anybody can install solar panels on their roofs, and they are directly connected to the grid. Yep. And they have two-way meters, so whatever is produced during the day goes to the grid, and their meter is running. It's a reverse metering, so it's running in the reverse direction. And when in the evening they come back home from offices or schools, so they use electricity from the grid. So at the end of the month, mostly they don't pay any bill, but some money comes into their pockets.
Okay.
This is about net metering here.
Yes. So everybody goes away. We just had a conversation earlier with one of the NGO groups, and they were talking about how these new developments of urban centers, where you never ever have to pay for energy ever again. I guess this would be one of those sort of situations.
Sure.
It must be really attractive to people. I think, it's just like, I get to go to work and I come back and I make a little bit of money, but I haven't gone to work outside of just my work, but my home being there.
So their roofs become, their powerhouses.
Yes. Yes.
And through it, they earn a lot of money. Because in Pakistan, now the energy tariffs have gone up beyond the, purchasing power of the common man. And also industry cannot afford it because then it becomes uncompetitive. So solar and other alternative and renewable energy, technologies can give them a good, alternative.
So how is the financing provided in this?
So why we should have alternative energy? You see, it has short gestation period. Because most of the other, energy projects, they require a lot of time.
That means the period between sort of thinking of the idea and actually having it in your home.
That's right. Because if you want to install a solar power plant, it just takes a month or so to install it.
Wow.
You see, for others, you need years.
Yes.
Of time. And then it ensures energy security.
Yes.
Because like at the moment, Pakistan is going through a crisis and it doesn't have a lot of foreign exchange available to buy imported fossil fuels like LNG, like coal and furnace oil. So if you have alternative and renewable energy power plant set up, so you don't need any money to, to generate electricity.
It's a really interesting take on the story of energy security, because coming from the UK where I am, the conversation on energy security is about ensuring access to oil and gas and coal, whereas you leapfrogging ahead in Pakistan and actually saying that's an old view of energy security. Energy security is the sun that shines on us every day, and we can access that. Not only is it the short way of going about it, ensures that actually our foreign exchange problem is taken care of.
Sure. And not only, you see, foreign exchange, we are polluting the environment.
Yes.
This fossil fuel-based energy generation is responsible for climate change as well. And Pakistan is on the receiving end. Pakistan only produces 1% of the pollutants which create climate change. But
Yes.
Pakistan's, provinces like Balochistan and Sindh last year were highly affected by climate change in the form of floods.
Yes. Yes.
Pakistan lost about $30 billion worth of, infrastructure.
Wow.
And its large population was displaced because of
Yes.
these floods, which were caused by climate change. So that's also.
So you can actually be standing out and show to the, the worlds that are still stuck thinking energy security means oil and gas and coal, to say not only is it this way, you can actually make it better for the environment, for all the people, and in that way you saying, although we may have suffered from this, we can actually demonstrate how we go forward. And look to us as the example rather than as the victim of climate change. We are actually the example of what we're going forward. I really like that.
Since I am a civil engineer as well, so I have introduced eco-friendly, zero energy, carbon neutral buildings and houses. These are the buildings and houses which are highly energy efficient and also produce their own energy. So you don't require any grid energy. So you must have heard about net zero, which is carbon neutral. So all these houses and buildings are carbon neutral. So we are trying to establish cities, which are sustainable cities, we call them, sustainable smart cities, all based on these concepts.
And are these houses able to do that by having solar on their rooftops or something? Or
yeah, actually, first of all, you make them energy efficient, so that the temperature that you generate inside through heating or through air conditioning is maintained.
Right.
So you make them energy efficient by about 70 to 80%.
Really?
Just by the design of the houses and buildings.
That is incredible. That's such a high percentage.
Yeah, and then the rest of the 20 or 30% is it comes from solar as well as from ground source heat pumps, which is geothermal energy.
Right.
Because as you know, if you go 10 feet down in the ground, so the temperature remains the same, about 20 degrees centigrade all year round, whether it is summer or winter. So these ground source heat pumps are also a good source of air conditioning. So with the ground source heat pumps as well as with solar and other alternative and renewable energy technologies, you can have houses and buildings which do not require any grid energy.
That's really interesting. That's really exciting there. And in terms of that, how do you see about the other side of that climate situation, about the coal that's being used along? Do you see that will naturally disappear off as you improve on these, or do you think that there needs to be something to actually drive that other side along?
You see, in China, they have banned all the coal generated energy, and the coal power plants are being dismantled. So we can do the same all over the world, because this is a dirty technology, and we should use alternative renewable energy technologies, like countries like Norway, Sweden, and other countries. They are going for offshore wind power plants, and many countries have a plan to go 100% renewables by 2030, and some by 2050.
Yes. So do you feel that, as a whole, from your connection with kind of other people working in the area and so on, that we're well on track to this transition, or do you feel that there needs to be something to help propel it further?
In Pakistan, a lot has to be done. You see, because we established this alternative and renewable energy board. But Asian Development Bank, they came up, their experts, and they said that we don't require a separate board for it. It should be merged into another department. The other department is the one which has established all the coal power plants, all the gas power plants, all the furnace oil power plants. So they have now given the responsibility of alternative energy development to the same department, which has been responsible for fossil fuel-based power plants. So I don't think this is the right strategy. Like in India, you have a separate alternative renewable energy ministry. But in Pakistan, we just had a small board, and now that has been dismantled, and the work of this board has been given to that department, which has established coal power plants, furnace oil power plants, and the gas power plants. So I don't think this is the right strategy. Through this policy, we developed, we gave several incentives to the private sector. You were asking that how did you bring in the funding for this? So we gave several incentives to the private sector through this policy, and about 250 private sector investors came up as IPPs, independent power producers, and they invested their own money. And
so the private investors that they came along, are these investors from Pakistan, or were they from
both, from Pakistan as well as from abroad?
Yeah. And how did they see the situation with for example, in places like the UK and the US? There's been recently these cases where people had bought essentially kind of through auctions rights to put up the offshore wind farms, and they have been saying actually the terms need to be changed again because the prices have changed. Have you experienced anything of that kind there, or are they done somewhat differently?
Yeah, actually, our regulatory authority is called NEPRA. NEPRA, gave them feed-in tariffs.
Right.
So those feed-in tariffs were quite attractive for the private sector to invest in.
Right.
But in the new policy, which came up in 2019, we are also going towards auction.
Okay.
But I don't believe any power project has come up since 2019 under that policy. So the salient features of this policy were to determine scope and role of different stakeholders throughout project cycle, lays down procedures, roadmap, engaging mechanism for development of these projects, and provide two modes of project development: solicited projects and unsolicited projects. Now, these investors could come up with their own, projects, which we called unsolicited projects, or we did, feasibility studies, and we did surveys and feasibility studies and solicited projects. Investors, we asked them that, okay, you go and install the project over there. Then different tariff options were given to them. One was a cost plus, which is negotiated tariff, and the other one was the upfront tariff, which is the feed-in tariff. And then guaranteed electricity purchase was given to them. Guarantee was given to them.
So
whatever they produce will be purchased by the government.
Okay. And in terms of going back to this question before about the on-grid, off-grid, in terms of the proportion of population within Pakistan, how many of these projects do they go right across the board, whether they're on-grid or off-grid, or are you focusing at the moment on the grid part? And how do the population balance look like in terms of that?
Actually, this policy was just for the on-grid power projects.
Right.
But along with that, you see, we also wanted to provide off-grid electricity to the remote villages where it was not possible to provide them. It was very expensive to lay down national grid over there because it's a scattered population. 50 houses over here, 50 houses, 10 miles away and all that. Especially the province of Balochistan, it was very difficult. So off-grid was the best, option for them. And this policy ensured grid provision, which was the responsibility of the purchaser. So guaranteed, energy purchase as well as guaranteed grid provision to them by the government. And various fiscal and financial incentives were provided to them. And provision of net metering, distribution generation also came through this policy.
So in terms of the grid provision itself, when you talk about, is that the national government who owns the grid then, or is that a private enterprise that looks?
No, at the moment, the government owns all the grids.
Okay. And there, in order to facilitate specific sort of wheeling of, transferring electricity from place to place, are there special channels for that electricity then in those situations, or do they go through the grid and is controlled that way?
No, they go through the normal grids.
They go through the normal grids as well. And of course, grid, that sort of large grid has in many situations been an issue with increased power usage as we electrify going through. So there's been talk about the need to increase the capacity of the grids themselves.
Not only that,
And
but
how
we have
is-
to upgrade the grids as well, because sometimes the grid is not able to take our alternative energy. So the
Yes.
grid has to be upgraded as well, because they're old grids, so they trip over.
Yes.
And also the grid spillover concept was introduced.
Yeah.
And the carbon credits through CDF. Are you familiar with the carbon credits?
Yes.
Okay. So carbon credits will also introduce this policy.
Right. So this is where in this situation, how do the credits work for you?
Well, for all you see, if you generate electricity through solar or wind or other alternative and renewable energy technologies, so what you are doing is that if previously it used to be produced through furnace oil or coal or gas, so whatever the carbon dioxide emissions equivalent emissions were being thrown into the atmosphere, now you are preventing them and you're replacing them with clean energy. So you can claim carbon credits for those.
Right.
That's how it works.
And the benefit of that is being paid for from the government, or is that being paid for from?
Actually they were giving it to the IPPs, independent power producers.
Right.
They were getting the benefit. Yeah.
Yeah. So it becomes a financing incentive for them
it
to
was
make
also
this transition.
That's right. So these are other incentives, like there was no custom duty or sales tax on the import of equipment for these power plants, no income tax, withholding tax, or turnover tax, repatriation of equity along with dividends freely allowed. You could take your profits or equity you see back to whichever country you come from. Yeah, they were very, very good incentives which were given. Then convertibility of Pakistani rupees into US dollars were allowed. Non-Muslims and non-residents exempted from payment of zakat on dividends. Zakat is Islamic tax.
Yes.
So they were exempted from paying those. And permission to issue corporate registered bonds and permission to issue shares at discounted prices. So they were very good, incentives.
This is an incredible list of incentives, isn't it? I mean, this is sort of like, for an investor from anywhere around, this makes it almost like a choice you can't forgo.
That's right.
How have people been responded to this?
They responded quite well, but you see, the problem is that Pakistani government didn't plan it well. Now, as I said, that in winter we only require 7,000 to 8,000 megawatts, and in summer 20,000 to 23,000 megawatts. But at the moment, they have established 43,000 megawatts of power plants, and about 30,000 megawatts are in pipeline. So for 23,000 megawatts max, you now have 45,000 installed, which means that you have to pay capacity charges to them. Whether they make electricity or not, whether you buy or not, you have to pay them. So because of that, a lot of circular debt is being accumulated.
Right. So
and, about 2.8 trillion rupees.
Right.
Is a circular debt, which is making the country bankrupt.
So, and you mentioned before about the ability to sell to neighboring countries. Is that something that's possible? Would that help with the situation?
It is very much possible, but you see, again, the planning has to be done properly, and for that you need grid availability.
Right.
So it's a long-term plan.
Yes. Yes.
Or what they can do is they can, give incentives to the industry to establish as much industry as possible and give them this. Like Pakistan is, constructing along with the Chinese, the CPEC, what we call China-Pakistan Economic Corridor.
Yep.
Along with that CPEC, we have about 9 special economic zones. In those special economic zones, many Chinese, as well as other countries will be establishing industry to export to the Middle East and Europe through this route. So what Pakistani government should do is that this 45,000 megawatts that they have the capacity to produce at the moment, and their requirement is only 8,000 megawatts in winter and 23,000 megawatts in summer. They should provide the excess electricity to these special economic zones and facilitate those industrialists from China and other countries to establish on war footing, so that this excess, electricity should be provided to them, could be provided to them.
Yeah. So tell me then, in terms of the board that you described and the way it's been subsumed into the overall energy ministry and the organization around. I mean, what I'm finding is the story you tell here is really impressive. It is remarkable. It shows the ability for the technology to be deployed, the ingenuity to plan and to organize. And at the other side of it, there is kind of like a layer that is not in sync. In some ways, it's tripping over itself. Maybe a way of thinking about that. How do you foresee, what that situation? I understand Pakistan, for example, have had political elections and kind of situations to do with that. Is it very much a political thing, or is it a civil service sort of situation?
Both, I would say, and also lack of experts and lack of the willingness of the politicians and the bureaucrats to appoint, energy experts in the departments. Like I'll tell you that we have starting with the Planning Commission.
Yes.
Pakistan's Planning Commission has a separate energy wing, headed by the member energy, they call it. But for the past, say, 1 year or so, nobody is heading that. So they don't have a head of the Planning Commission's energy wing.
Yeah.
That is the department which has to plan how much electricity we should have and all that I was telling you in the past.
Yes.
They should have planned properly how much electricity is required, so that we should not be paying these capacity payments for not utilizing that electricity.
Yes.
But they are not doing their job. Then we have NEPRA, which is a regulatory authority.
Yep.
It is their job to see whether, because they issue the generation licenses to the power IPPs, as well as they give tariffs.
Yes.
So all the feasibility studies made by the IPPs, first of all, goes to NEPRA. And it is up to NEPRA to allow them or give them generation license. NEPRA should have all the information at how much electricity is being produced and how much is required in the near future and the distant future.
Yep.
Or in the midterm. But they have not, I believe, planned it properly. Then we have NTDC, the National Transmission and Dispatch Company. Again, it is their responsibility to plan. And we also have the CPPA, the Central Power Purchasing Agency, and then the PPIB, the Private Power Infrastructure Board.
Right. So one of the questions about how we make this energy transition go forward in many ways has always talked about technology and the leapfrogging of technology that we need. I think what you're bringing up is almost like a leapfrogging of bureaucracy in some sense.
And then you see what I mentioned, that none of these departments, and we also have a Ministry for Power and Ministry for Energy.
Yes.
None of the ministries or these departments and the discos, the distribution companies, have any energy experts in them.
Right.
So when you don't have relevant experts, so you see, you can't plan it properly, you can't execute it properly, you can't implement it properly.
Right.
All the, and the result is that the common man has to pay a very high tariff.
Yes.
Because government is paying capacity payments to these IPPs.
Yes.
And you see, there's excess energy available, which is not being utilized. So the common man actually suffers.
Yes.
Because of this lack of appointment of proper energy experts. So capacity building is required with the ministry and with all these departments that I mentioned.
And if I go back to this situation where the Alternative Energy Department board was separate and independent, it feels like then you would be able to speak with a clearer voice than within something like this. Is that how has that situation been?
Sure. Actually, for the past 4 years, there was no chief executive for that board.
Right.
And ultimately, they disbanded it. And it was established through an act of the parliament. And that act of the parliament has been repealed. So what I believe is that there's a very strong oil mafia. There's a very strong LNG mafia. There's very strong, coal mafia. These are the mafias which import these fossil fuels, and they don't want alternative energy to develop because then they lose their businesses.
Yes,
so
and of course they lose their power, really, right? Ultimately,
of course. So they were behind, the disbanding of that board.
Right. It brings very very much the concern in some ways. We're now at a stage where in many respects, as you're demonstrating, the technology is there. And not only is the technology is there, in the way you've described these homes that you can build, the energy can be freely available to the everyday person. But we seem to be quite difficult in being able to make that gap and make that jump along. And there was a conversation we had with another gentleman in Pakistan who was talking about how, transparency may be better improved through other sort of technology, blockchain technology, and that kind of thing along. How do you feel where really the electoral power amongst the electorate can be obtained so that they can have their voice? I'm sure they would like the energy to be cheaper, not more expensive. I'm sure they would like the country not to be indebted in the way that you're describing through overcapacity, which is the worst way.
Actually,
if I'm indebted because...
Problem is that you see a lot of these politicians and bureaucrats, they get a lot of kickbacks from from establishing these, power plants.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is even a child can understand that when you have a maximum requirement of 23,000 megawatts in summer, and in winter it's just 7 to 8,000. So why did you allow 45,000 megawatts to establish and 30,000 more are in pipeline? So it's very easy to understand that a lot of commissions and kickbacks are the real cause of over, capacity.
The overcapacity, right?
Yeah.
Right. So in fact that kind of development beyond, and of course from the environmental perspective, as you were talking about, all this takes resources. All this actually goes along and incurs essentially a debt to the environment too.
Actually, all these fossil fuel-based power plants, they are very bad for the environment. They create a lot of pollution. A lot of greenhouse gases are emitted. So they contribute towards global warming and greenhouse effect and climate change.
Yes.
And that climate change, in India, which is bordering Pakistan, we have a lot of coal-based power plants, and when the wind flows from India towards Pakistan, all the pollution comes over here. Then the Indians and Pakistani farmers, they burn the crop waste.
Yes.
And that burning causes a lot of smoke and smog in this weather. And that
Yes.
smog is killing people. You know, world over, about 7 million people die every year. This was through WHO report. And
Yes.
128,000 per year die in Pakistan because of this air pollution. So
Oof.
all that crop waste which is being burned by the farmers in India and Pakistan can be easily converted to energy.
Yes. Yes.
And we have got the technology, which I said I brought from England and from other countries.
Yes. Yes.
So that is available, but
Yes.
nobody cares, and a lot of pollution is being, and all people are dying.
Yeah.
128,000 per year is a very big number. You see,
Yeah.
the terrorists only kill a few hundred every year in
Yeah.
Pakistan, and most of the resources, goes towards anti-terrorist activities.
Yes.
Whereas you see 128,000 die every year through air pollution, and they don't care about it.
Yeah. So, is it possible to bring those technologies on a sort of on a farming scale, so that the farmers can turn that to be
Definitely,
used in that way?
definitely, it can be done. It can
So,
be done. It can be easily done.
so they can then become energy providers in addition to being food providers.
Exactly, and they will earn from that crop waste which they are burning at the moment.
Yes.
It will give them dollars. You see,
Yes.
it is a saleable commodity, and
Yeah.
they can even export it to Middle East.
Yes. And what do you see as the hurdle for doing that?
Because nobody cares. The departments which are responsible for such initiatives,
Yeah.
they have people who first of all have no qualification or experience, and secondly they damn care.
Right. Right. That's a terrible situation.
Yeah,
Then I sympathize very, very strongly with you.
these are the this was the first wind power plant established in that wind corridor, which I showed you on the map.
Yep.
So these are the wind farms in
Yes.
the Jimpi district, Thatta. Next, please. The 50 megawatt project.
Yes.
This is also a 56 megawatt project.
I like this aspect where you did the survey, that sort of kind of analysis, and then bringing that into implementation, and
Yeah.
it's
And they are now giving electricity to the national grid. You see, we
Yes.
started with 7,500 megawatts of projects, and half of them, 50%, are already giving
Yes.
energy to the national grid.
This is it's just a great example of engineering.
The Alternative Energy Development Board, AEDB, has been a driving force in promoting and implementing renewable energy solutions in Pakistan. Established in 2003, AEDB has made significant contributions to the adoption and growth of alternative energy technologies. This video discusses AEDB's achievements in wind, solar, hydropower, and bioenergy sectors, the policy and regulatory framework for renewable energy in Pakistan, challenges faced, and future prospects. Wind and solar energy. AEDB played a crucial role in developing wind and solar energy projects. Pakistan's coastal regions in Sindh and Balochistan possess substantial wind potential. AEDB streamlined project approvals and introduced policies like feed-in tariffs to attract investments. Similarly, Pakistan's abundant sunlight makes solar energy promising. AEDB supported solar solutions in remote areas, improving electricity access and reducing carbon emissions. Hydropower. Hydropower has been actively promoted by AEDB, enhancing energy security. Utilizing domestic water resources for electricity generation reduces dependence on fossil fuels, ensuring a stable power supply. Bioenergy. AEDB promoted bioenergy solutions, using organic materials for sustainable energy production, reducing environmental pollution and carbon emissions. This benefits both energy needs and sustainable agricultural practices. Policy and regulatory framework. AEDB collaborated with government agencies and stakeholders to create a supportive policy framework. This streamlined project approvals, introduced feed-in tariffs, and facilitated net metering regulations, attracting investments, and promoting renewable energy projects. Challenges and future prospects. Challenges include grid integration, energy storage, financing, regulatory hurdles, workforce development, public awareness, and environmental considerations. Addressing these challenges is essential for sustainable growth. AEDB's achievements have laid a strong foundation for Pakistan's energy landscape. By promoting sustainable energy, reducing carbon emissions, and enhancing energy security, AEDB has proven the benefits of renewable energy. As Pakistan continues its renewable energy journey, AEDB's contributions are invaluable in paving the way for a more resilient and sustainable energy future, ensuring a brighter and cleaner tomorrow for the nation.
Thank you very much. I think that was amazing, and you've really left me with the sense that it's possible. The hurdles are very much kind of within our political will, in some sense, within the information to the ordinary person to know that life can be very different, and the transition is in many ways better for them in almost every angle, from the quality of the air that they breathe to the money in their pocket. How do you think, in closing, what would you advise us, if there was a fairy godmother, to come along, what would you ask?
Well, you see, I will ask that it's not only for this generation that we are working to promote alternative and renewable energy in the world, especially in Pakistan. It is for our coming generations. Because if we pollute our air now, you see, there is a chance that there will be stunted growth of children. There is a lot of, their mental upkeep, their mental, intelligence will get affected. So, as I said, that 128,000 of human beings die in Pakistan every year through air pollution, and 7 million die world over due to air pollution. So a lot has to be done, and it has to be done on war footing.
Yeah.
You see, through COP28, you see, we should pledge that at least we should work towards controlling this air pollution as soon as possible and save those 7 million lives which are lost every year.
Thank you. Thank you.
I thank Dr. Basharat for taking his precious time from Islamabad, Pakistan. It was a really interesting session. I hope the viewers, they will find it very interesting. And Dr. Basharat really rightly said that experts are needed. We do talk about problems. We do talk about carbon emissions in underdeveloped countries, all the developed countries. If you talk about India, Pakistan, Asia, Africa, even UK, US, China, if we have the right experts and they are training, it starts with the small projects in the local communities and showing the success story with Dr. Basharat shared. So that will also bring a change. And we have to save our planet, our Earth, for future generations. Since I've come back from UK, let me share, I've been convincing my father, and I live in Banigala, Dr. Basharat knows, and he's been meeting these 4-5 solar companies, and we are trying to put all our home energy completely on solar. So I've convinced him, and finally we're going to go solar. In our neighborhood, there are 4-5 homes that they've gone on solar, David, for your information. So there are a lot of good things happening. It's just that it's a bit, you have to really budget it, plan it well. And when you show the success stories, people have gained confidence on renewable energy projects in Pakistan, and that is bringing a change. So I thank Dr. Basharat again for joining our session. Stay tuned. It's our campaign, It's For You, which is happening during 12 days of COP from 1st to 12th December, which is happening in Dubai. We'll be having more interesting global specialists on climate, like Dr. Basharat. They'll be sharing their stories, representing their communities and countries. And as we say, COP is not only in Dubai, it's in your cities, in your countries, and in your homes. Thank you, and goodbye from me and David.
Goodbye. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Basharat. Really, really
Thank you.
exciting.
Goodbye.
Wow, Collins, that was a really interesting discussion on intensive knowledge of renewable projects in Pakistan. What's your take on it? What did you learn?
Yes, indeed, Sadaf. Yeah, amazing and great insight from Dr. Bashrat. And, I've just been listening in and gathering a few notes and getting to sort of compare what's happening in Pakistan and, in Kenya. And two things I picked from his, analysis of the situation. And I was really particularly interested in terms of what the crisis is actually helping, the people actually come up with, great ideas on how actually to deal with the energy security and crisis, particularly, on the housing, the design and the construction. There, he comes from that background, and the idea of smart cities and the fact that we have people keenly looking into how they can actually create housing projects that don't actually rely on the the grid energies that we have. That's brilliant. Number two, he mentions also about the capacity building uh, within government and the other side of the independent power producers, and it's something I think we also need to kind of scale up in our case. And lastly, I saw in his presentation about the indigenous concept. That's basically the communities, and I think when we talk about the transition in terms of the energy and the dilemma in it, it's important to consider how the rural communities or the indigenous groups can actually also benefit from these new technologies that come along. And lastly, to just agree that the energy matrix and the transition towards renewable energies contribute significantly to actually reducing the carbon emissions. So looking at the nexus, climate change, energy, and then on the other hand, we have the livelihoods about the people who actually need to depend on this energy for their livelihood. It's a learning lesson for me and for many others also. So thank you, Sada.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, from Pakistan perspective, I would like to add, we have so much water resources when it comes to, we have rains, we have dams. In the northern areas, this snow melt streams, but so much water is wasted. Unfortunately, now Chinese is taking interest in developing small hydro projects up in the northern areas to generate power. Windmills, as he mentioned, solar energy is growing like on a very fast track, even in the rural communities back in Pakistan. Even they're making it affordable for people. Even banks are offering loans. So I think these are some encouragement projects when we talk about renewable energy, how to reduce our carbon emissions. But again, Collins, we have a long way to go. It's like I would like to mention, it's been mentioning in the news currently in Pakistan, Lahore is facing smog issues. People are down. They had to shut down schools this time because cross border with India, there's so much chemical burnings in the air. The airports has to shut down. So a lot of it's affecting. I mean, it's not just climate change; it's affecting people's health, and that is getting more scarier day by day when I hear these stories. So I would like to ask you, because since you belong to Africa, what are the challenges over there of renewable energy? Is the government doing? Are the private companies? Do you have any solar projects or alternate energy solutions there in communities? How much awareness do you guys have there? How much interest people have it? Yes.
Thank you, Sadaf. It's good you asked. And if I have to pick, for instance, because I'm in Nairobi in Kenya, and it's true that Kenya is making tremendous efforts towards green energy. And if you look at the statistics, I may not have the numbers, but uh, for instance, geothermal energy, and Kenya is topping the list around 7.6. in terms of harnessing geothermal energy for, wind wind power is actually also on the rise. We have new projects along in different parts of the country. So I would say, and recently, even during the African Climate Summit, the president did mention actually that he made a strong statement that Africa has the potential to actually transition to green energy to power its everything. And so, if you look at that, for the cases you mentioned about the communities and how people are tapping into that, the we have the independent power producers, the solar and everything that are actually channeling that to the rural communities. I would say, however, much is needed to still build the capacity, the training to do that. If you say in the city, I know, like, power, paying for power bills in the cities, it's usually not just easy. People have to deal with that challenge of maybe the rising bills when it comes to power. But I believe the idea, looking at what Pakistan is doing, we have a long way to go, but I think we are in the right direction to just help, also people try to understand that this transition is not just about, saving on your power, bills, but also, bringing to it a safe environment for for you. And so I think that's the message that has to go along that way, and how to also ensure that the people who can't afford that, what kind of subsidies can allow them actually to just tap into the different green power lines to also, yeah, be able to use them. So
That
it's interesting to see how that taps along, and it's good to share these experiences on what you guys are doing and experiences here in Kenya.
Exactly. So I have another question. I think we should have a discussion. Even yesterday, when we talk about carbon emissions, cutting down on fossil fuels.
Yeah.
What's your take on? Because I live in the UK and sometimes I come to Pakistan. The concept of electric cars. First, hybrid cars were introduced. Now, fully electric cars are coming. Recently in Pakistan, there's a project, motorbikes have launched. So slowly this concept is coming in. But again, like underdeveloped countries like Pakistan, Kenya, African region, other countries, it's still expensive to buy an electric car or even electric bike for that matter. What's your take, and what do you think what can be done? Either cheap alternate options. I know China must be doing something, and I've heard Chinese, they are coming with a fully electric car, which is affordable. Let's see how that goes. And secondly, I would like I thank our colleague Richard has joining us for UK as well. He's the whole campaign we are running, it's for you. Hi, Richard. I hope you got some rest. We have a second kickoff session talking about renewable energy. I'll come back to you. I have a question for you as well. So coming back to Collins. So, and what about the transportation? Because carbon emissions, when we talk about trains, we talk about airplanes. I even saw a documentary. They're coming up with the World Economic Forum that shared that there will be they've had experimental flight, which is only 40 minutes flight, and the whole airplane will be on the renewable energy kind of model they're working and experimenting. So they are coming up with kind of, but it's going to take a long way. So what's your take on this, Collins?
Yes, thank you, and I agree with you that this discussion, picking from what we had yesterday on the same, I think we need more and more voices and discussions on this topic. We have currently in like in Nairobi, electric buses, electric cars, the taxi Ubers, and companies are trying to launch into electric motorbikes. Uh, Still new, and the whole aspect of what I call the energy security and the dilemma in it is somebody who will say the cost implication for getting an electric, or and probably have a source of livelihoods for what I have now. And so I think that kind of balance or dilemma is also something that governments have to check on how we smoothly transition to ensure that people have the livelihoods around it. So for in terms of the pricing and the costs around it, if, from where I sit, the first thing someone has to ask is, yes, I want to transition, but what's the cost for that electric, bike? But the good thing about it is the innovations that come along. And as I said, that if you're in a fix, you you kind of think through on how you can come out of it. And for me, what I'm passionate about is the new innovations and ideas that are actually coming along on how we move towards green energy. And so it's a window of opportunities, and I think it's possible to it's possible. It's a step, a small step that we are making, but it's possible indeed. Richard,
Exactly. I mean,
thank you.
it's the yes. I'll get into Richard into
Yeah.
discussion. Richard, I know you're half Italian and half Swedish, and you're living in UK right now. And Sweden and Scandinavian countries are doing brilliant on sustainability. What's share your views on how they are introducing all these concepts that we shared: electric cars, electric vehicles. What are they doing on renewable projects? I've just personally been to Oslo myself, and there are a lot of wind power projects over there. Kindly share your views from the Scandinavian part, how they are, so that people can, hear their story, what Scandinavian countries are doing on renewable energy.
Thank you, Sadaf. Yes, I grew up in the northern parts of Europe, as the Scandinavian accent is giving away. Sweden and Norway, in particular, are very often held as a model example of how you shift your whole energy supply into renewables. And I think I might be wrong here, but I'm fairly sure about 75% of energy used in those countries come from renewable sources, which is the highest we have in the world. As a reference point, it can be said that for the whole world, it's about 17%, 18 possibly, as we are increasing renewables. So up there, people are effectively 4 times as much reliant on renewables as they are in the world average. And it sounds great. And I think Scandinavian countries have been at the forefront of making these efforts. But it's also worth remembering that whoever decided once upon a time to draw these boundaries for countries and country limits gifted them with an extraordinarily supply of renewables. There is a myriad of rivers in Scandinavia where I think about a quarter of them have some form of hydropower plants. And if you don't have rivers of that magnitude and size and particularly frequency, you can't really build out your hydropower, which is, by the way, very effective for transmitting energy. Sweden also has still, despite having phased out 3 reactors, a fair bit of nuclear power. Nuclear power, as I think the Japanese example showed, sadly, 12 years ago, is fraught with some issues, particularly when they're built in zones that might not be totally safe. Scandinavia is really one of the least earthquake-prone zones in the world. So there has had the ability to build out nuclear power. And then obviously there is, at the moment, a big rollout of wind, where the focus is mostly at the moment because the hydropower has already been built decades ago. So wind is what's being rolled out now in that example. And even there, you are in a zone where you have pretty good winds for capturing a lot of wind power. But most of all, that cannot be excluded from the debate is that these countries are extremely sparsely populated, which means you actually have vast areas of land resources where you can develop things like wind farms without it being intriguing on large neighborhoods, or as some people say, it's an eyesore, etc. And that is obviously something that not all countries in the world have the ability to do, where the world average is far more densely populated. And lastly, something that is very much hidden under the debate in many ways, but actually is a great source of renewable energy, is geothermal heating of houses, where you effectively take a huge upfront cost in installing this tap from the center of the earth, which is always pretty warm. And then you have your energy for free for the rest of the duration of that. So that is more expensive. It requires a lot of resources. It might not be feasible for the whole world, just as hydro and wind towers are. These are fairly extensive structures that require a lot of capital expenditure. Norway and Sweden, as well as Finland, Denmark, are rich countries. They can afford it. It's not the path that all countries in the world can embark on just because they want to. So while I think we're doing great in many respects, it's worth remembering that we were dealt a pretty favorable hand in our ability to actually put these structures in place that now are a huge benefit to us. So I think there are two stories here. They're doing very well, but they were dealt a great hand. The other aspect, perhaps, which I am very, very fond of is, and I'm banging my own drum here, is very much that Scandinavian people seem to have a larger respect for nature than perhaps people in a lot of other countries. We were brought up to see it as a gift, and where you had much more extensive rights of accessing land that's actually privately held, because it's seen in many ways as a common resource. But with that also comes the responsibility that you cannot freely pollute and litter and destroy it, because you actually have access to someone else's land by law, I might add. And that's also an aspect that I think perhaps should be looked upon everywhere in the world as perhaps a model for how we can look upon some of the resources that Mother Nature have given us.
Yes, Richard, I rightly agree. I mean, there's so much can be done. And as even like you have strong economies, I mean, if Pakistan even want, we're struggling with our economic condition. There's so many other challenges like health and poverty and other issues to be dealt. But anyways, let's come back to now COP28 and as it's happening in Dubai. So I want to ask Collins and Richard, have you had the chance to even watch the news, what's actually happening there? Because I'm going to play in a short while the opening speech of the United Nations General. It was quite interesting and I want the viewers to also watch it. Yes, Collins, because I've been following the news. And what's your take? Like some of my friends, they're already there. The youth is very excited. They're posting pictures. What's your takes and have you watched the news? What have you followed so far? What's happening in Dubai currently, Collins?
Thank you, Inga. Yeah, I'm actually getting time to just pop in from the news updates from the different, platforms. I have quite a number of friends from Kenya who are actually attending COP, and we're getting to have a chat briefly in between their sessions. Interesting, and the opening up with the loss and damage fund, and progress on that line. So just waiting to see how that plays along, and yeah, still following up. I'll gladly be waiting to see what you have for us.
Okay, Richard, what about you? Have you had the chance? I know we are running a live COP parallel to the actual COP. So, what's your take? Have you followed any? Because I'll ask questions. King Charles' speech was quite good. He's running this foundation. We know he's doing quite a lot of environmental projects. Would you like our viewers to share how he's doing? Because he's very passionate about environment and climate. Yes, Richard.
Yeah, he's clearly had this leaning for a long time, which I personally think is great. I think it's something that we all should be reminded of and try to do the best we can. So he is very passionate about the climate, and being effectively the senior statesman in many parts of the world, because the Commonwealth is quite vast. He has the reach as well to project this kind of image, if we like, and thought process, which is very important in that respect. So I think he represents, in that sense, very much a new type of leadership that we don't normally associate with for a better word, the elderly statesman. We've also heard from the Pope, who had planned to go to COP but was prevented from illness from going. And we know he has expressed very, very strong views over the last decade, really, about what we are doing to our planet and the fact that the crisis is essentially man-made, therefore it can also be fixed by man. And it's a shame that he's not able to be there, I think, because he also represents very much the elderly statesman and has a phenomenal reach, because Catholicism touches so many parts of the world where he is de facto the supreme leader. So I think it's good that all these very senior people are raising their voices. That's an important step in the right direction. Ultimately, they don't actually possess any genuine power because they are not deal makers, they're not lawmakers, but they can certainly influence it. And if they use their influence as a force for good, I think it's something we all need to use if we can. But it's worth remembering they don't actually have any formal real power in that sense. I think also today in COP is, on the face of it, I think the most interesting session in terms of the various areas being discussed, because it's the agricultural day. And it's an area that for me is of very particular and specific concern. And I know we have some very interesting clips to show you later during these 12 days with regard particularly to what we are doing with our farming practices and how we can address those issues.
Yes, exactly. Agriculture, as I was just talking about, Collins, earlier, is about the smog and air pollution which Pakistan is facing, and India and Mumbai is the most polluted cities in the world. I think agriculture awareness of burning these chemicals to the farmers would be an interesting debate I'm interested in. I haven't had the chance really to follow, but tonight I might log in. So they have a YouTube, by the way, for the viewers online on YouTube COP. You can follow their updates over there. So I'm going to just play the opening speech of the United Nations General, and then let's take the discussion from there. What do you think of his speech? And let's hear him out.
Your Highness, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, President of the United Arab Emirates. I want to express my profound gratitude for the wonderful hospitality that we are enjoying in Dubai from the government and the people of the United Arab Emirates. COP28 President Dr. Sultan Ahmed Al Jaber, I want to congratulate you on the positive start of the COP, with an expeditious approval of the agenda and the landmark operationalization of the Loss and Damage Fund. Congratulations. Your Majesties, Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, friends, all protocol observed. Just days ago, I was on the melting ice of Antarctica. Not long before, I was among the melting glaciers of Nepal. These two spots are far in distance, but united in crisis. Polar ice and glaciers are vanishing before our eyes, causing havoc the world over, from landslides and floods to rising seas. But this is just one symptom of the sickness bringing our climate to its knees. A sickness only you, global leaders, can cure. Excellencies, Earth's vital signs are failing. Record emissions, ferocious fires, deadly droughts, and the hottest year ever. We can guarantee it even we are still in November. We are miles from the goals of the Paris Agreement and minutes to midnight for the 1.5 degree limit. But it is not too late. We can, you can prevent planetary crash and burn. We have the technologies to avoid the worst of climate chaos if we act now. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has charted a clear path to the 1.5 degree world. But we need leadership, cooperation, and political will for action, and we need it now. It's true, our world is unequal and divided. As we see in this region, conflicts are causing immense suffering and intense emotion. We just had the news that the bombs are sounding again in Gaza. And climate chaos is fanning the flames of injustice. Global heating is busting budgets, ballooning food prices, upending energy markets, and feeding a cost of living crisis. But climate action can flip the switch. And renewable energy is the gift that keeps on giving. It's good for our planet, our health, and our economies, cleaning our air, meeting the world's growing energy demand, connecting millions of people to affordable electricity, bringing stability and security to markets, and saving money, as renewable energy has never been cheaper. Excellencies, friends, the diagnosis is clear. The success of the COP depends on the global stocktake prescribing a credible cure in 3 areas. First, drastically cutting emissions. Current policies would lead to an Earth-scorching 3-degree temperature rise. So the global stocktake must set clear expectations for economy-wide national determined contributions presented by all countries that cover all greenhouse gases and align with 1.5-degree limit. The G20, which represents 80% of the world's emissions, must lead. And I urge countries to speed up their net zero timelines to get there as close as possible to 2040 in developed countries and 2050 in emerging economies. Second, we cannot save a burning planet via fire hose of fossil fuels. We must accelerate a just, equitable transition to renewables. The science is clear. The 1.5-degree limit is only possible if we ultimately stop burning all fossil fuels. Not reduce, not abate, phase out with a clear time frame aligned with 1.5 degrees. And the global stocktake must not only commit to that, it must also commit to triple renewables, double energy efficiency, and bring clean energy to all by 2030. The economics are clear. The global shift to renewables is inevitable. The only question is how much heating our planet will endure before it happens. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is recommending ending our addiction to coal by 2030 in OECD countries and 2040 for the rest of the world. At the same time, according to the International Energy Agency, the oil and gas industry accounts for just 1% of clean energy investment. So allow me to have a message for fossil fuel company leaders. Your old road is rapidly aging. Do not double down on an obsolete business model. Lead the transition to renewables using the resources you have available. Make no mistake, the road to climate sustainability is also the only viable pathway to economic sustainability of your companies in the future. And I urge governments to help industry make the right choice by regulating, legislating, putting a fair price on carbon, ending fossil fuel subsidies, and adopting a windfall tax on profits. Excellencies, third, climate justice is long overdue. Developing countries are being devastated by disasters they did not cause. Extortionate borrowing costs are blocking their climate action plans, and support is far too little, far too late. The global stocktake must commit to a surge in finance, including for adaptation and loss and damage. And it must support reform of the multilateral development banks to leverage far more private finance at reasonable costs for developing countries in climate action. And developed countries must show how they will double adaptation finance to $40 billion a year by 2025, as promised, and clarify how they are delivering on the $100 billion as promised. Excellencies, the climate challenge is not just another issue in your inbox. Protecting our climate is the world's greatest test of leadership. And so I urge you to lead. Humanity's fate hangs in the balance. Make this COP count. Make this COP a game changer. Make this COP the renewal hope in the future of humankind. Thank you.
So, Collins and Richard, what's your take on United General's speech? He was quite motivated and energized as they are. So, he talked about fossil fuels and carbon emissions.
Yeah, I mean he's very explicit, and let me also state that I actually think he's a fantastic public speaker, given that English is not his native language. He still is a very powerful speaker in English, and his delivery is extremely good. He's articulating what I guess most people in the world are feeling. He's pointing out in many ways the obvious, but just like going back to King Charles and the Pope, he actually hasn't got any real executive power. He can talk, but he hasn't got the legislative power to actually enforce anything. He can only plead. And in that sense, his voice is very, very important. It's a voice of reason. It's a voice of, again, a grand statement actually trying to do good. But we haven't got the mechanisms in place where he and United Nations has any real power in what they're proposing, and that is a big problem. And I think that's why COP in many ways is kind of, dare one say it, is irrelevant. When I don't feel particularly optimistic about the future, I can see how it's effectively just a trade show for people coming up with various solutions to the climate crisis, hoping to sell those ideas to political leaders, because the legislative power to prevent what we all agree on is a man-made crisis is just not there. And I think he is very frustrated, and I can sense that in his speech, that he is not able to pull the levers that matters in the world because he hasn't got that executive legislative power.
Rightly said, Richard, and I agree. I mean, I've just attended one COP in Glasgow, as I was mentioning earlier with my interview with Andrea from Thailand. I mean, all these summits and conferences, I mean, it's good start. At least people are talking about climate change. Youth is quite excited. They go. But what happened after Paris Climate Agreement? My question is. And when all these countries, I'm very optimistic, or you can say I'm very diplomatic that way. I'm not opposing the COPs, if in my views, but I'm just seeing that after COP28, when all these people will go back to their countries, they're the decision makers. What are they plan for their countries? What's India plan? What's China plan? What's Pakistan plan? Our prime minister, I'm following him. He's there. He's meeting. They're asking for huge funding for climate change projects. I know how the bureaucracy in the governments work in this day and era. Richard and Collins, I think nobody's fool enough where all the funding is going on climate change projects. So let me share an interesting story with you guys. When I started working on sustainable development goals in Pakistan, I was a passionate because I was stranded in the floods, and that was an eye-opener in 2010. That's why I ended up for working climate change environment projects, and I've ended up meeting wonderful people like you now that we are working on this. I visited all these departments from UNDP to USAID to UK aid, water aid, all the UN who's working on sustainable development goals, FAO, the Food Authority. And I was so disappointed. I'm not saying that they're not doing work in countries like Pakistan, but there's so many challenges. If you want to, for example, Collins, if you want to apply for a project, for a funding, I'll come back to the NGO concept, nonprofit, you've registered it. And there's so many protocols you have to and they'll only select the people who they know. So what happened to your project? If Collins wants to start a renewable project in Nairobi and he has done his homework, he's done his proposal, you'll waste 1 year, Collins. I'm not disappointing you. And in the end, you'll be disappointed. Where's the funding going to come from? And that's my question from Richard and David when they talk about pension funds. What's your take? I mean, there's so many people that they want to do something for climate change, but where is the financing coming? Where is the funding coming from? You need to come up with a different strategy for sustainability. How would you sustain a project if there is no business model plan to it? You cannot, the project will fail. So many NGOs have failed because when the money stops coming in, project stops. So my question to Richard, and I'll come back to Collins.
It's an excellent question, and the answer is, for me, it's very obvious and in many ways extremely simple. The difficulty comes in how you approach that. For us to move to, let's call it a better world, and in this case, I want to stress that the better world means less planetary abuse. And planetary abuse takes many forms. We overfish the oceans, we overuse fertilizers in our farming practices, which leaves longer term damage. We pump too much fresh water out of the aquifers. And most of all, we burn too much oil, gas, and coal, so we are permanently altering the temperature of the planet. If we address the latter case, or the latter issue, which is our excess creation of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is almost solely related to us burning oil, gas, and coal. For us to do less so, it needs to make economic sense for all the parties involved to not burn it and not use it and effectively leave it in the ground. So all steps towards doing that needs to start off with an approach saying it needs to make economic sense for us not to use it. Once we have done so, you are going to get all the financing flooding in to renewable projects, to alternative research into what we can and cannot do. But that money will never flow naturally into those projects if you run the risk investing in those that you are going to get undercut by a coal mine next door that can still dig lumps of old carbon out of the ground and burn it to create energy. As long as that's the case, you are going to rely on subsidies and political decisions to drive the transition, and that will never work. You need proper capitalist practices to be in full play, and then it will happen by itself. So the starting point has to be creating economic incentives for all parties involved in the extraction and the use of oil, gas, and coal. It really is that simple.
Rightly said, Richard. Collins, what's your take on it?
Yes, Sadaf, and I think you answered my question when you asked Richard about it, because my response was going to go back to the economics around it, and what we are trying to drive about livelihoods. And so, if from the speech earlier on, I agree, and the Secretary General mentioned about the human fate. Where does our fate lie? And he implores on not just commitments, but also fast tracking on the the green energy transitions. And Sadaf, you're right to ask the question about what you asked about a young person running a non-profit organization in a rural setup, and they have this brilliant idea, they want to do something, and they're trying to look for funding, and it's all like a dream. And I think it's important from where Richard comes from, and the campaign that you are running. It's it's something Sadaf you should pick it up for discussion on. I was in a workshop with young people, and it came out like, you know, you have this brilliant idea, we have a proposal, and people probably are asking, what have you done before, or you know, how long have you been doing this in this industry? And I think it's important to see how we can kind of bring this collaboration and ideas together, so that we don't let a brilliant idea down there on a bin just because, you know, a young person has no avenue to actually actualize their dream. So it's interestingly, from the discussion at COP, I think I was smiling because Sadaf, when you said about the It's For You campaign and the introduction speech at COP, it brings the sense in what you said about, you know, COP is not just in Dubai, because actually the crisis that they are mentioning about, you know, the security challenges and, you know, everything, we are saying that it's for you because down after the 12 days are over, when you come back home and, you know, you sit down on your couch, the reality hits that, you know, you have a neighbor to check on, you get to the office, you pass by, you know, with your car in traffic, and you have people around you trying to sell to you something. Like it starts to, the bell starts to ring when you start to, you know, interact with the real life situation on the ground. And that's why I believe that how do we translate the discussions around that at a higher level into tangible solutions that can actually uh, help the groups that are actually most vulnerable to actually survive the crisis. So for me, that's how I look at it. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, this NGO profit, you know, I don't get it, Richard, because it's like sustainability and the funding. So I now talk about ESG. I don't know whether you've heard or not. I've just recently exploring and done some certification in environmental social governance. First, it used to be, Richard must know, CSR, corporate social services. Now they're coming into ESG. And I've lately heard from a very dear friend, they're very active and they're doing training and workshops on ESG. And he shared that around 75 countries, including UK, the governments, they've approved the policies, and by mandatory compliance, the corporate sectors, they have to follow the guidelines of ESG. So what's your take, Richard, on ESG, environmental social governance? Will it be a success? Because CSR, they tried to launch it, but now they change it into ESG.
Yes and no would be my quick answer in terms of how it will take hold and what it entails. Personally, I don't like the moniker ESG. I think it has been randomly chosen in subject that kind of makes sense for people because they have an opinion about them without actually thinking what it means. I like to think about the subject area in a much more simplified way. We have social and we have environmental issues in companies, just like we have economic issues, just like we have other forms of issues, and they all represent risks to a company from the standpoint that if you don't have boundaries and you don't have a clear vision for how you're going to operate with regard to your employees in the social perspective, how you're going to treat your supply chain, how you're going to treat your clients, you will eventually face dire consequences as a business. At the same time, that runs in parallel with how we look at environmental issues. If you are a company and you have exposure to it and you have issues, then that represents a risk to the company's business model. And all those areas that represents risk can ultimately be addressed by the G in ESG, which is governance. So all that matters to me in ESG is actually governance, because the governance decides how you are going to deal with the S and with the E and with other issues that potentially faces the company or the business, which are not mentioned in ESG. But they all represent serious business risks to a company's short and long-term ability to actually go on and remain profitable, remain successful, and keep on delivering goods and services that clients want to buy. But at the heart of it sits the governance issue. You are going to get and run the company the way the owners decide it should be run. And that is expressed through the governance. If it's my company, I want the company to stand for certain things. I want it to address certain issues. And most of all, I don't want it to be engaged in certain behaviors. And I take that responsibility as the owner of the business. Hence, governance is all that matters when you set the standards under which you want the company to operate. That would be my brief but fairly explicit answer on how I see the issue. And I think people don't really focus on it. We think, oh, governance, what does it mean? It's very simple. There is an owner to every business, and you take that ownership responsibility by addressing everything that governance stands for.
Richard, I rightly agree, because when I recently did this certification just to see what ESG is, so they shared very good examples. And I would like, because I come from the tourism and hospitality background, I want to introduce the first eco-tourist lodge in Pakistan. I mean, not just like saying it's eco-tourist, but proper eco-tourist lodge, which have been established. I've seen in Brazil, I've seen in Amazon, I've seen in US, in Europe, where they're properly following the guidelines, from the plastic waste to renewable energy to the organic food, even the linen, the cloth, everything in that resort is eco-tourist friendly. So that concept is coming in. It's a new concept, and a lot of, like, with the social media marketing, they're charging quite a lot per night in this resort, because they want to encourage people, for investors, that if you want to make, because tourism also is very close to my heart, and I might be having a separate discussion on that. Ecotourism, sustainable tourism, what is green tourism, how tourism is affecting worldwide, how tourists are creating environmental hazards, destroying these beautiful places, what can be done. So that's, I mean, as you say, like, even if you're running a company, whether it's a corporate sector, whether we talk about tourism, you need to have like ESG. The thing that got me attracted is that they have this whole list of compliance that you have to follow in order to certify, like we have to have ISO certifications, if Richard, for security reasons. So they want to make a similar kind of thing, that if you don't comply those, maybe they'll put fines and all. But it's just new. Let's see how it goes. It's a good start. How companies or how corporate sector will adapt them, follow them. But yeah, so that's like my take on ESG. But coming back to COP28, I think a lot is happening. Let's follow we have a lot of interesting sessions coming up. There'll be speakers from all across the world. Yesterday, I want to discuss about the Mariaki people, which from Greece all the way, Christiana shared. Richard, that was a very interesting discussion. She's a success story. It took a while when she started it. How would you take that? I mean, you asked a very good question, that if you want to grow mushrooms in other countries, and she said that, well, you have to do research. Research is very important for such projects, engaging with communities. So, Richard, what's your take on that? Such projects is knowledge sharing. If somebody wants to start and replicate those projects, what's your take on that?
I think we will see those kind of projects being replicated all over the world, because they make commercial sense. And that goes back to the economics underlying it. And I think Christiana tells a wonderful story, but it's a story anchored in the real world economics, that even if your whole intention is doing good, you cannot rely on other people effectively giving you the money for doing good, because eventually money will dry up. And that is probably my biggest concern with regard to the loss and damages fund that is being proposed and now trying to be implemented, is that we are going to hand out money to people who have been very badly affected. And then the question inevitably arises, who puts in the money? And those putting in the money, can they take it back if they get affected? And I think that is something that to me is not very clear. With regard to Christiana, she cuts away from all that because she focuses on the economics of how this actually makes great economic sense while I'm doing good. She doesn't start at the point, I want to do good. She has an idea that's commercially extremely viable. And when you look at what she's doing, I want to invest in that. I want to be able to see if I can grow those mushrooms in my backyard. Because if I can use them the way she does, I'm going to make money. That's how the world works. And she understands that really, really well. Then she obviously is a far more likable person than I am. And that's okay, you know. But her whole basis in how she's reasoning is anchored totally and solely in economics. How can I provide a good or a service that will be in demand by the people who have the money in their pockets? And that's how all business ventures need to start. If you haven't figured out what it is you're going to provide and to whom, then you're just into wishful thinking. And I don't think she is at all. She's extremely savvy. She's very, very good at economics. And she found an angle and a niche that happened to work, or happened, I'm being a bit nasty, but it fits into the rest of her whole story in what she wants to do for Meriaki people in a place that by all accounts have been effectively abandoned. And she revitalizes it, but she does it not by doing good. She does it by saying, we can make money. We can create economics here. And then people will come back.
Exactly. I mean, I just like amazed and surprised, and that's what It's For You campaign is. We're giving this platform for people to come and share their wonderful success stories and, learn from that. Collins, I think you've learned a lot and you're still learning. What project are you thinking about that when the COP is over and you would like to start and maybe engage? Because it's not just talking and coming. I already thought of some projects. People are sending me on my social media. They want to connect. I think it's a good positive feedback from Bangladesh on LinkedIn, because I posted some things there. They're contacting, who are you? What's this campaign about? So Collins, what are your ideas? What's going on in your mind? What are you going to do after when 12 days of COP is over?
Okay, thank you, Sadaf. Yeah, I'm just reflecting on the discussions you're having, and what Richard actually is something I didn't think through on the ESG concept that actually Richard mentioned. Just to get back slightly on that discussion, and to agree that in most cases, with these ES tools, that we tend to focus so much on how we are supposed to fill in that, and forget about actually the governance aspects that actually drives us into the results or the outcomes. So I agree. So Sadaf, yeah, I work with women groups from the rural setups and young people, and I'm thinking through on how to connect the dots around sustainable solutions aligned with the water and the simple natural resources that actually are around us, especially in the rural setups, and how we can harness those resources. It's not like the big resources, but little things that we actually play around with in our rural setups, and how we can translate those into products, for sale. So that's what's thinking through my mind. Like we are in the digital space, so how do we, look at something you have been actually looking around as you pass by every day, okay, lying there in the house. If you go down to your store and you check around every day, you close your door and you throw it away and saying, okay, that has to be at the back of my house, not to be seen. So my mind is like, this time after COP is the right time to pick what you have always closed at your back door, to bring it in front for a better world. So that's what is on my mind.
Okay, great. So I think now I'm going to play a very interesting another video, not about COP28, but it's about environment and climate change. Let me play so that our viewers can have some interesting side. They'll just get bored when we're talking. So let me just play that video as well now.
All life on Earth, from ecosystems to human civilization, is vulnerable to a changing climate. Scientific evidence now shows that the current human-caused global warming of 1.1 degrees Celsius is increasingly impacting nature and people's lives everywhere, despite efforts to adapt to the changing climate. More frequent and severe climate extreme events, such as heat waves over land and in the ocean, droughts and flooding, have caused widespread and pervasive impacts to ecosystems, people, cities, and infrastructure, and limit the chances of a livable future for all. There is new knowledge that human-induced climate change caused these destructive impacts, or makes them more likely.
This report is important because I think it really underscores the fact that the scientific evidence is now unequivocal. It's clear that climate change is impacting on the well-being of human societies, but also on the well-being of our planet. This report really brings us a new message, though, that those two things are not separate, that there's a very intimate relationship between our well-being, the well-being of our planet, and the forces that are driving climate change and the resulting impacts and responses that we may have to that challenge.
Since the last assessment report, the scientific evidence has increased and emphasized, based on observations of impacts, how the ecosystems and human society are changing. Under the change, we see the loss. We have specific examples that indicate the underpinning mechanisms, and we are learning from that also for our projections. As global warming is proceeding, what to expect for the future and what the future losses and damages will be if climate change cannot be stopped.
The extent and magnitude of climate change impacts are larger for each additional fraction of warming than estimated in previous assessments. So are the risks projected for the future. The impacts involve severe and widespread disruptions to nature and to society, reducing our ability to grow nutritious food or provide clean drinking water.
The poorest communities are the ones that are strongest hit by climate change, as they're least able to cope with the growing impacts. Our assessment indicates that there are between 3.3 and 3.6 billion people who live in such hotspots. These are spread across parts of Africa, South Asia, South and Central America, small islands, and the Arctic. Climate change acts like a stress multiplier in these regions, where people have limited access to clean drinking water, to sanitation, to health facilities, or education. The livelihoods of people are also strongly dependent on climate-sensitive activities such as farming and fishing. They have limited access to funding, limited accountability from governments, and limited trust, therefore, in governments. Climate impacts are also felt differentially by men and women, as they have different roles and responsibilities in society.
This report shows that climate change is impacting every ecosystem across the globe, from high mountain ecosystems to the deep ocean, from tropical coral reefs all the way to Arctic ice-driven ecosystems. We see the fingerprint of climate change across all of these systems. One of the other things that the report really shows is that extreme events are increasing and their effects are rapidly changing ecosystems across the globe. So marine heat waves on land, storm events, these are driving changes to the ecosystems and species that we rely on. This is pushing species towards polar regions, it's pushing species to higher, cooler altitudes or down into the deeper, cool waters. And because of that, it has cascading impacts across ecosystems, but also people's livelihoods and societies that depend on the services that these ecosystems provide. And as we approach the limits of what species and ecosystems can tolerate, we risk crossing what we call tipping points, these critical places in the system where returning to previous conditions where recovery is less possible.
Climate change impacts are magnified in cities, where more than half of the world's population lives today. Heat waves amplify urban heat islands and air pollution in cities that affect people's health. Critical infrastructure within settlements, such as transportation, water, sanitation, and energy systems, have been compromised by extreme weather events. Cities and settlements by the sea are specifically impacted by climate hazards. They are at the front line of climate change, being directly exposed to interacting climate and non-climate coastal hazards, such as sea level rise and destruction of local ecosystems that previously protected people living along the coast.
Multiple climate hazards are also occurring simultaneously, with often cascading impacts. These impacts are becoming increasingly complex and challenging to manage. How these will affect nature and people depends on the speed and level of warming and how we adapt.
The Working Group 2 report of the IPCC shows that the impact of climate change is worsened by destruction of habitats, also unsustainable use of natural resources, deforestation, and growing urbanization and population growth trends. The report also found that for the African region, increasing urbanization is an important compounding factor for climate change. For the coastal areas of Africa, especially the low-lying coastal areas, population is increasing rapidly because of the economic opportunities that the coastal environment presents. Many people moving into the coastal areas live in informal settlements, marginal areas, and high-risk areas. And this has implications because the threats of climate change is compounded and the ecosystems and the people that rely on them are affected.
El reporte muestra que tenemos acciones de adaptación importantes en diferentes partes del planeta, pero los avances no son similares en diferentes regiones y de hecho no estamos haciendo suficientes esfuerzos para alcanzar los niveles de adaptación necesitados por los niveles actuales de calentamiento. Eso resulta en vacíos de adaptación importantes, especialmente en regiones de bajos ingresos como mi propio país, Guatemala, donde vemos barreras importantes que vienen no solamente de aspectos financieros, sino también de aspectos institucionales. La buena noticia es que sí tenemos acciones de adaptación que podemos hacer para reducir nuestros niveles de vulnerabilidad, pero la efectividad de estas acciones dependerá de los niveles de calentamiento. Por lo tanto, tenemos que tener tanto adaptación como mitigación trabajando mano a mano.
We also have evidence of what's called maladaptation. These are adaptation actions that result in unintended consequences. For example, coastal ecosystems that are destroyed through the construction of dikes and seawalls, or climate-related risks that are transferred to other regions or groups in society. Even greenhouse gas emissions can be increased through maladaptation. Our report shows that Indigenous peoples, ethnic minorities, and disadvantaged groups, such as low-income households and those living in informal settlements, are some of the most affected by maladaptation. Unfortunately, this reinforces and entrenches already existing inequalities.
The report shows that nature offers significant yet untapped potential to reduce climate risks, to deal with the causes of climate change, and to improve people's lives and livelihoods. However, nature needs space and protection to be able to provide those services.
By protecting and restoring 30 to 50% of our world's ecosystems on land and in the ocean, we help plants and animals build climate resilience. Nature, in turn, can help us regulate the climate, give us clean water, control pests and diseases, pollinate our crops, and provide nutritious food. Cities also provide a global opportunity to advance adaptation, mitigation, and sustainable development simultaneously. Using different adaptation strategies, such as nature-based and engineering approaches together, or providing social safety nets, can generate wider benefits for health, food security, and ecosystems. However, investing in nature and cities alone isn't enough. To secure a healthy, livable planet for everyone, we need to transform our way of life fundamentally. Taking action now gives us the best chance of success.
Where this report is different is that it puts humankind into context and emphasizes that we cannot abandon this context, because it emphasizes the relationship between three systems: climate, human society, and biodiversity, and indicates how these systems influence each other. Human society causes climate change, it causes biodiversity loss, and these interactions that are underpinning this are also the source of the solutions. With modifying these interactions, we can move into a sustainability space.
So I think one of the important advancements is not only talking about risk, we're looking at the solutions that we have available to respond to that risk. But a list of solutions is not adequate. What we need to be able to do is determine the feasibility and effectiveness of those solutions and how they might be drawn into practice. And so it really gives practitioners guidelines about where is the best place to act. We've got very clear pointers, for example, to the protection of ecosystems and activities in cities as ways that we might be able to change the world.
The science is clear. Any delay in concerted global climate action means missing a brief and rapidly closing window to secure a livable future.
This report is a dire warning about the consequences of inaction. It shows that climate change is a grave and mounting threat to our well-being and a healthy planet. Our actions today will shape how people adapt to climate change and how nature responds to increasing climate risks. It recognizes the interdependence of climate, biodiversity, people, and it integrates natural, social, and economic sciences more strongly than earlier IPCC assessments. It emphasizes the urgency of immediate and more ambitious action to address climate risks. Half measures are no longer an option.
IPCC reports provide the most up-to-date science related to climate change for policymakers to inform their decisions on developing climate-related policies. Hundreds of scientists worldwide have volunteered their time and expertise to produce this report. IPCC reports go through an extensive review process by experts and government to achieve the highest quality. This process makes them policy relevant and policy neutral.
So, hi, Mr. Jinnah. Thank you for joining the live session. Mr. Jinnah is joining us from Karachi, Pakistan. We were just playing this video for the viewers for human diversity ecosystems and how they are adapted on the IPCC report. I think this video was brilliant. What do you think, Mr. Jinnah?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good day to everyone. Hello, Richard. Hello, Collins. How are you?
Hello, Mr.
Am I
Jinnah.
audible?
All good here. Thank you so much
Yes.
for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dina.
Thank you. Thank you, Collins. I feel, it's very, it's crucial opportunity for nations, to reform their commitment to, combating the climate change. Because, there's a COP, the 28 is going on. We have a one platform. So we can share our issues and we can discuss our issues. And then, we have this united body there who can, who can assist us. But over the years, maybe the COP series is not affecting the way it's supposed to be. But on the positive side, at least we have one platform, where we can discuss our issues and concern. And the one of the concern which we have in Pakistan and maybe all the African countries also, because we never contributed a lot to this environment. The hazard we are facing, but yet we are the victim of the climate. We are the victim of environment, our countries, because like we don't have those motor industries, we don't have factories, we don't have a lot of things who has affected the environment, but yet we are the victim. So I think countries like us, like a Pakistan, or the Asian countries, some of the Asian countries, and of course the African countries, we should join together and we make this sort of commitment between us to support each other, and also we educate people. Look, we are the victim. We are not the people who causing all these issues. So that's the one point I like to mention, Sadaf.
Thank you, Mr. Jinnah. Yes, Collins, your thoughts after the amazing video that I just shared with you guys.
Yes, great insights from the documentary, and I agree from the IPCC report. If we don't act, then the consequences are actually with us already. And Mr. Jinnah has just mentioned, from even where we sit, I mentioned like in Kenya we have the floods. After this, you're likely to hear another report about drought, and somebody asking where did the water go. So it brings that focus, and to just look at what I picked from one of the presenters in the documentary about, yes, we have the risks, but then what are the solutions? And it's good that we are here talking about it. I'm in Nairobi. Richard is in the UK. We are in Pakistan, and for me, it just shows how connecting these whole ideas. At least when I go back home, the discussion on the table changes when I'm able to tell somebody that there's someone in Pakistan trying to do this. It's adapt with their ecotourism plan. It brings this awareness to just to say, okay, we can start small and we can do it. So change has to start from within. Thank you.
Rightly said, Collins. Yes, Richard, your views and thoughts on human diversity, ecosystems, and the solutions they talked about on this IPP report.
Yeah, it's pretty frightening pictures being rolled out. I think they affect each and every one of us in different ways, but they're not painting a very pretty picture. I think everyone, more or less, there might be the odd climate change denier out there, but in a global context, I think pretty much all of us share all the concerns that were raised here, more or less to larger or lesser degree, but we're all sharing it. Where we seem to differ very much is how we approached the issue. And I don't think for a second, I hope I don't come across as arrogant enough that I pretend to have the silver bullet solution. I think there will be a myriad of things that gets us on the right path eventually, because within myself, I'm an optimist. But it will inevitably, and I can't stress that strongly enough, it has to involve collaboration. Because you cannot solve climate change single-handedly. We're all occupying the same space, and we're all affected by what our neighbor decides to do. I always tend to think of it a little bit, as a fisherman in the river. And the river is flowing through with all the water, and I'm trying to be a really good citizen and keep my stretch of the river clean where I live. But I have no control over what flows down the river further upstream and what those people do. And that gives me only power to affect what I can do, and that has to be the starting point. But the reality is that I am affected by what other people do in my ability to earn a livelihood as a fisherman. So collaboration has to be the way forward. And for us to collaborate and find a common ground, it actually needs to make economic sense for everyone involved. And I always keep returning there because that's my anchoring in life. We need to show that by actually making the right decisions and taking the correct climate action path, we can do it while building livelihoods for everyone involved. And we can make sure that people can earn a living and make money from the decisions that are taken on an individual basis. That's very much my starting point. And then everyone needs to figure out what that actually means, because it will mean different things to different people. But the first step is the realization that that's the only way we're going to be able to tackle the problem, I think.
I think I rightly agree, Richard, what you just said. So it was an interesting session, Mr. Jinnah. I don't know whether you had time. We had Dr. Bashar talking on renewable energy projects in Pakistan. Then me and Colin were discussing what Kenya is doing on renewable projects. Mr. Jinnah, my question to you: recently in Karachi, these e-bikes projects have been launched, and you must have heard of it. So what's your take on it? Because Karachi is also struggling for air pollution, and what is the government or the private people, how are they involved, are they concerned, or they're just saying, okay, it is there, we don't care about it. I know Karachi issues are complex, but what's your take on it, Jinnah, because you're living in Karachi?
Yeah, the last thing you said, we don't care about it, this is very true, because in the yesterday session, we highlighted, when people are fighting for hunger, so they don't pay attention to environment. And someone is quoted very well, I think it was Bill. He said, one of the person quoted, we need to see, we are worried about the 2 week survival, then why we worried about the thing what going to happen in couple of after years. So this is a thing. But coming on the positive side, yes, we have the EV bikes here, and e-bikes are here, and factories are there. But again, the fuel is very, very expensive. The battery is causing, taking most of the share. So that's one concern. And secondly, I've been working for EVs for last 5-6 years. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, there is no, the tax relief, or the duty relief on the EVs, and especially the cars. And we have calculated a lot. We imported, the company I used to work, they imported 10 cars from China for EVs. But again, there's no policy there, so we cannot import. So this is the kind of, like the typical word, the mafia war going on in Pakistan with the conventional type of cars and of course the EVs. But again, sooner or later we have to adopt it. A lot of things are, switching to, the e-bikes, and as soon we have a better rate, better, the taxation improved, then most people will going to use it, because right now it's very, very expensive. Yes, Sadaf.
I rightly agree, Jinnah, that it's costly, and that's what we were discussing. But let's see how it goes. Efforts are happening. New hybrid cars came now. Fully electric cars are here. I don't know. China is thinking about making some affordable fully electric cars. So let's see, a lot of things are happening. It will take time. The good
Yeah,
part, and I'm
so
very
just let me add one point. The Chinese car, if I order a Chinese EV, it can reach to Karachi port only for 7,000, less than $7,000. The good car, the four-seater car, and that gives you something like a 350 kilometers in one cycle. It's very, very economical, very, very, cheap. But the fact is, the duty structure is not there. Even if I order a car, I cannot import. So that's a big issue here. But sooner or later, when we have a good policy, the car will be. I'll be driving a car for only for less than $7,000, and it will cost me something like a 400 rupees, maybe a less than, maybe around something like a probably $200 for whole day for 350 kilometers just for $2. So the cost, the cost, very, very cost effective. They have made a lot of cars, but again, the problem is I cannot import. Is a legal issue actually. Sadaf, please.
rightly said, Mr. Jinnah. So I think Collins, Richard, we had a great start. Second day kickoff. It's for You campaign we are running from different parts of the world: Pakistan, Kenya, UK, Norway. Do join us for more further discussions coming up. We'll be there around for till 12th December for the COP28, which is happening in Dubai. Our campaign is, we say, COP is not only in Dubai, it's in your home, in your city, in your communities. It's for me, it's for you, it's for everyone. So I'll hand it over to Richard and Collins now. We'll be having another interesting discussion by Monica. Let's hear her story out, and I'll see you guys in a bit later. Continue with the It's For You campaign, which is happening from 1st to 12th December.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Colin.
Sadaf.
Thank you, Sadaf. Thank you,
Thank you,
Richard.
Mr.
Thank you.
Jinnah.
Thank you.
So, the end of session here, it's going to be me and Collins rounding it off for these last few minutes. And we are going to return to Africa, where we're going to show a very particular clip. And I'd like Collins to make an introduction, because he was the driving force behind this, and how we get to know a very special lady called Monica.
Okay, thank you so much, Richard. As you have mentioned, so in the next session, we want to share, a recording we had with Monica Yator. As I mentioned, I have been working with, I do work with women groups in the indigenous communities and young people. And so Monica Yator is a Kenyan, and she's doing an amazing work with, some communities around where she comes from. She's actually currently in Dubai as we speak, and she was actually making a presentation a while ago on a very interesting topic regarding food systems, people and places, regenerative agriculture, and the agroecology from the ground up. And so it's amazing on how we get to connect and hear inspiring stories about her work in Kenya. So Richard, I think we can get to hear more from her introduction as well from the clip. So over to you, Richard.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Colin. And we are going now to show this wonderful clip with her. So bear with us, and thank you for watching.
Yes, Richard, I think getting it off.
Yes, it didn't really want to play, and I'm not sure what it is that's causing that problem, to be perfectly honest. And it's a great shame because I think it's a wonderful story. And Collins has been very, very engaged in this. But again, we are discovering that we have some technical issues beyond our control. What can I tell? They will no doubt be sorted out. But
Sure.
instead of showing the Monica clip, we are going to go with a slightly different story, but it has many connections with Monica.
Sure.
I had the pleasure of meeting a very young entrepreneur, just like you, Collins. Young guy, firm ideas, great business sense. So I think the two of you probably are quite similar. His name is Christoph Hayes. He lives in the UK. He's an engineer by trade, by education. And he has some pretty firm ideas about farming practices and how you make money actually not cutting corners and depleting our soil and everything else. So instead here, I'm going to go with that clip, which I hope will load fine. And we're going to watch it, and then Collins and I will discuss briefly what it is that sets entrepreneurs like himself and Christoph in a bucket that they want to experiment and they want to do new things. So without
Richard?
much further ado, we're going to
Sorry.
run. Sorry?
Can you hear me, Richard?
Yes, I can hear
Yeah.
you.
So I can just help you. I've just invited a guest from Pakistan. He's joining Mr. Ali Kamal.
Okay.
I'm just going to ask him to come on the stage. Just give me a minute. He's working with the Planning Commission of Pakistan and working on sustainable development goals. Let's see when he's ready to talk. We'll have a discussion with him. And in the meantime, Richard, you can just see if you can play Monica's video.
We're saving Monica for another day. It's quite a
Okay.
long clip, so we won't have time to do that.
Mr.
We're
Ali
going to
Kamal?
sort out why it doesn't work, which is a little bit strange. But now I can see we have someone here backstage ready to come on, right? So
Yeah.
let's move.
He's-
Here he is.
Yeah. Hi, Mr. Ali Kamal. Thanks for joining our live session, which we are running for COP28 from 1st to 12th December. Nice to see you. I haven't met you in person, but please introduce yourself, and I'll introduce you to my colleague, Richard, who's joining us from UK, and our African team, Collins. Yes, Mr. Ali.
Thanks, Sadaf, and good to see you after a long, long time. Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Collins. So my name is Mohammed Ali Kamal. I'm Chief of Sustainable Development Goals at the Ministry of Planning Development Special Initiatives. Basically, Ministry of Planning is the custodian ministry for Sustainable Development Goals in Pakistan. And since I'm sitting in Islamabad, so it's basically the national focal person right now sitting with you. So the VNR, Voluntary National Reviews, and all other kind of the financing thing and coordination internationally is done through us, the Ministry of Planning. And we are all working here in collaboration with the civil society, private sector, all the departments in the provinces and overall Pakistan, wherever the stakeholders are present. So we are coordinating with them and we are working with them. So that's a little introduction for you.
Thanks, Ali, for your introduction. So our question is, we are having this parallel virtual event for COP28, which is happening in Dubai. And our slogan is COP28 Dubai is not only in Dubai, it's in your home, in your countries, in your communities. I would have gone to Dubai personally, Ali, but the reason I didn't go is that, these conferences, people talk, and what's the outcome? What's your take on Pakistan? Because our current caretaker prime minister, he's there. They're asking for some funding. I'm following the news. Since you're working with the Sustainability Planning Commission, how far has Pakistan come? You've been involved, you're an economist himself. What's your take on the COP28, which is happening in Dubai, in Pakistan perspective?
So basically, we realized very late, not last year or 2 years ago. Basically, we realized quite late that health can be a severe macroeconomic crisis in COVID, and then climate is a real disaster especially in 2010, then 2017, and then 2021, 22, when we had devastating floods. And there are three kinds of floods we have experienced in 2021, 22. And the main problem was that how to mitigate that crisis, because adaptation is a little bit easier, which we have done in the last 20 years or 25 years, 2.5 decades, basically, now since 1998. But main thing was mitigation. So for mitigation, in even in Paris agreements, we had certain indicators in NCDs, which we offer as mitigating practices in Pakistan. But the main thing was that after the floods, we estimated that we need $32 billion just to have a needs and damage that's needs and damage assessment. But there, after that, we need 12 to 15 billion dollars that year, apart from 32 billion, to mitigate the crisis. And we need to have resettlements for floods. We need to have some kind of building controls, resilient infrastructure, aware, sensitized people when we have floods or when we have a disaster like this. What to do? How can we mitigate with those disasters whenever there's disasters in one place? Then we have a strong communication channels inside Pakistan, that in one district, since Sadaf is from Kalam, so if there's something happens in Kalam, so we should have a good channel who can tell Bahrain or Madian or Sawat or Mingora that, look, there's a flood coming from Kalam to this area within next 15 minutes or half an hour, because half an hour is not much time, but still we can do much in that, in evacuating people from the hotels, from the homes to other areas. At least we can try. So all kind of things are happening, but the speed is that's one of the things which we all talk about in Pakistan, whether speed is good or not. But for that, we need financing. And when we talk about the financing, we have the entire budget of Pakistan equivalent to 4.5 to $5 billion. And when we are talking about $32 billion, that's too much for us. So that's why caretaker Prime Minister, or the last Prime Minister, and the Hassan Iqbal Saab, who's the planning minister in Egypt, he represented in Sharm el Sheikh, and he talked about the development financing for the developing countries. As far as SDGs are concerned, developed countries committed 0.7% of their GDP, and they have allocated just 0.13% of GDP. So in that way, the UN is failed uh, to collect the required amount of the optimal amount of funding or financing from all the developed countries. So we are working on that, targeting that, saying that loud and clear in different forums, and COP28 is one of those forums. Over to you, Sadaf.
Thanks, Mr. Ali. Richard, would you like to ask him a question? Because Ali Kamal is outside. He's an economist and he's very passionate about. He's working with the Planning Commission. Do ask questions. Collins, you as well. You can ask him, and he'd love to answer your questions. Yes, Richard.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kamal, for coming here with us today. And it's always a pleasure meeting fellow economists, so to say. But I abandoned the economic roots a long time ago. Thank you so much.
Love to hear that.
What is your sense that the developed nations are constructing as reasons for not coming up with the financing that was effectively agreed some time ago?
So my view is that everyone who is financing any project in the world, of course, they will be looking at their interests as well, and that's perfectly all right. When they are addressing their own concerns, then we must sit together, address their concerns, that there is we may call it selfishly vested interest, but that vested interest will be a global vested interest. And when there is a global vested interest, whether it's a take care of ozone layer or the smog in Pakistan, that's one of the issues which we have due to our neighboring countries, because we and some of the old cars running on the streets of Lahore. So Lahore is actually is number one in AQI index, air quality index. So it's a very bad weather right now over there. So these kind of global problems which we are facing. So when we have projects, something like which is affecting the global environment and protecting glaciers as well. So we need to sit with the developed countries, or developed countries need to sit on one forum to decide what do they want and what do we want. And there is a collaboration on a mutual interest projects, and that and where we can have the financing from those developed countries, and we can implement it in the next 10 to 30 years, because climate is crisis is such a crisis which is the biggest man-made natural crisis, and we need to mitigate, or we need to, we can adapt in maybe 2 to 5 years, but for the mitigation thing, if it happens in 50 years, it will take another 50 years to set it or mitigate it. So we need to implement it today, and we can get the fruits or the outcomes of that impact of those interventions on those mitigation effects, or mitigating the climate effects, maybe in 30 to 50 years. So it will be a longer term loans. And when we are talking about longer term loans, then it should be at close to 0% interest rate, because that's one of the things which is very important, because there are certain guys who were talking to me, and they said, let's have 2% interest rate and have it for 10 to 15 years. If 10 to 15 years is not enough, it may take 30 years to have an effect on that.
Yeah, these are very, very long commitments, and they need long-term clarity about what the economic realities are, for sure. Otherwise, you can't really embark on long-term structural projects to do that, and then find in 5 years' time that your financing conditions have completely changed. That sounds to me like a complete recipe for disaster.
Exactly.
What do you think are the biggest challenges domestically in terms of mitigation? Do you sense that there is any resistance in local areas that perhaps will create problems, or do you sense that the whole of Pakistan is on board with these things, and there is a uniform, not only political will, but only, so to speak, a will of the people that we need to address these things?
There are a will of people, because I was talking to some industrialists, and they said, let us know what to do. And they are totally into the mitigating thing, and we have a cost breakup of some certain industrialists, and it takes only 0.5% extra as far as the cost is concerned to adapt those technologies or adopt those technologies which can mitigate the climate crisis which we are facing right now. There's one major thing on which we are struggling, and that is sensitization and awareness. It is not easier thing. Private sector can do very well, civil society can do very well. As far as the government is concerned, we can make laws, we can make regulations, and that's how we can implement it. Otherwise, it is not possible. So this is one area, one hard area in which we are struggling. Otherwise, if people understand that, and they know that it is very important to do that, they will they adopt it, certainly, but it comes with the regulations or implementation of the regulation as well. As far as the Hunza is concerned, there's one area in Pakistan, they have totally banned plastic bags in that area, and people are responding to that. The local people are asking the tourists not to use plastic bags. So and the government is helping that as well in implementation. So in that way, it's a civil society, it's a government, it's market, and a community. They're all working together to implement certain things. But all these sectors, if they work jointly, and that only happens when there's a strict regulation, implementation, and sensitization. So this is one of the areas in which we are working. We are struggling as well, but I believe that there's a will. The only issue which we are facing is the awareness and secondly financing if there are bigger projects. So as far as the government is concerned, the government thinks in billions of rupees or millions of dollars. So they are implementing it all over Pakistan. So we have 241 million population, and we are working with that kind of population. So I think that's overall the entire story of Pakistan.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. You're giving me a lot of insight here. Before you said
And the political
241
will is
million
there.
people.
Believe me, the political will is there,
Yeah.
and the politicians are very much in line. Bureaucracy is very much in line. The only thing is that they want to know what to do, what is the policy outcome, what is the policy action they will do, how much financing is there, which we need. Do we have the financing? How can we obtain the financing? As Jeffrey Sachs, I always quote him. Jeffrey Sachs says, go to all the AAA rating agencies and ask them to finance your projects at a minimum possible level of interest rate, which is close to 0%.
Yeah, yeah. Before I'm very intrigued. You see, I keep asking these questions because I'm very interested, and I'm don't want to hug the whole limelight here in terms of questioning. Could you give an example of one of these really long-term structural projects that are needed for the adaptation and mitigation to work better in the case of Pakistan? So those watching perhaps get a better idea of the type of projects you're describing.
Before, sorry, Ali Kamal
yeah.
responds, I would like to introduce my new guest who's joined all the way from US, Jessica, on a very short notice. It was 7:30 in the morning, and she's kind enough to join our session. I'm going to introduce her, and Jessica, I'm going to have a discussion regarding the COP28, which is happening in Dubai. We are running this campaign before Ali Kamal answers that question. Thank you so much for joining us. Yes, Ali, back to you.
No,
okay,
I don't know about those projects, but I can say that there are certainly different projects which a climate change ministry is thinking. They have made those projects. I can have the list for you if you really want that, because as far as the planning commission is concerned, we are into reporting and mainstreaming. So I'm not into totally climate change. But there's a billion tree tsunami which World Economic Forum has appreciated 3 years ago. There's a Milwaukee forest. There's mangrove forests. There are certain shift to electricity plants in Jhimpir and Tata on the wind power plants. We were closing down all the coal power plants because of the sulfur and all other technologies which are ruining the industry. There's strict regulations and restrictions on certain industries who are just throwing away their chemical water into the ground or field grounds. So all kind of activities are there, all kind of projects are there, but I cannot think of any single project which where I can say that it may have an effect for 30 years or for 50 years. But these forests, whenever they grow, it will have an impact on the environment within 20 to 30 years. Because if we are planting right now and restricting the deforestation, we need another policies to coherent it. As our friend Sadaf area is concerned, they don't have gas, which we call natural gas for cooking. So they use wood to or some kind of kerosene oil to cook food. If we do not have the natural gas, there are other measures which we can take it over there. For example, solar cookers. or certain kind of other clean fuel ones.
Yeah.
So if we do not create those opportunities for the people, they will continue to burn kerosene oil, other kind of oils. They will burn they will cut trees. They will have the branches of the trees for their cooking. So those kind of activities will continue. So all those kind of activities, we need at least 15 years to 20 years to change the mindset and provide the clean fuel and other forms of mitigation measures which people adopt and then will continue for the sustainable manner.
Perfect. Thank you so much for laying that out in context. Much appreciated.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Ali, for your detailed perspective. So, hi, Jessica, seeing you after a long time. Welcome to the It's For You campaign, which we are running for 12 days of COP, which is happening in Dubai. Please introduce yourself. I know you're doing amazing work. And I would like to ask you, because since you're involved, you're an educationist, you're teaching as well. What's your perspective from the US side, how US is coping on climate change and women involvement in climate change projects as well? I would like to bring in discussion because I'm very sensitive to gender equality. Yes, Jessica, over to you.
Thank you, Sadaf, for inviting me here. And it's nice to meet the other panelists today. I come from a background in social entrepreneurship, which is most simply put the simultaneous creation of social benefit or value and economic at the same time in some way. And CSR, corporate social responsibility, that really had zero impact. People hired CSR representatives and they put them in the office and they gave them their little work to do. And then nothing came of it. And it's very similar with ESG, environmental sustainability and governance, I think that stands for. And where we're coming to is that anything that's going to benefit, whether that's environmentally or in other social aspects, has to be integrated into the business model. And for example, I went to Bangladesh and Panama in 2022. And in both of those countries, I was given 15 bottles of water a day. And those businesses, and here's the key phrase, they can be incentivized to change habits. And the point here is that they're already spending money on clean water. But if we can, if they could buy filtration products instead, then that is reducing the shipping of the bottles of water, let alone all of the bottles that are being thrown into the environment locally. And this idea that social responsibility in some way fits with whatever the business is doing. And I have I've talked about this with Sadaf for 4 years, had the idea that there are US companies that have been sued for dumping waste into communities. And a part of the problem here is the corporate priority of increased shareholder wealth. And I don't disagree that it's the job of the corporations to increase shareholder wealth. I do agree with that. However, not when you're killing the people in the community that you serve. And so, for example, one of the most recent tragedies is Norfolk Southern is a railroad company. They have been asked to put on new brakes on their trains, but because they cost $2 billion to do that on all their trains, they haven't done it. And the last time that trains had new brakes was literally the Civil War, 1860. And what happened in East Palestine, Ohio, yeah, Richard's nodding, is that we had a horrendous derailment that put lots, and that's an understatement, of chemicals into the local system. and gave many local people diseases. It's just happening right now, and destroyed water systems, because at the expense of a community, a corporation did not, do what they needed to do. And their rationale is it doesn't increase shareholder wealth. So there has to be some type of incorporation of the community into the uh, into the corporate priorities list. And there was one other idea that I've had for a long time that I've discussed with Sadaf, and that is that so these companies who have been sued in the United States, and they had to come up with ways of not polluting the local waters and forests, they can give that technology to Pakistan. Like, there should be this, we are one humanity, right? We're not, and for some reason that's really a weird, and people think like I smoke a lot of pot when I say we are one humanity, but I don't. Like, we are. These US corporations could work with the companies in Pakistan to teach them economical ways of not dumping stuff into the local waters. That's the brief synopsis of my, big ideas on this, and my frustration with COP28. I love the title, Antidote, because you have environmentalists who literally throw tomato soup on paintings, and all that does is destroy great works of art from the 18 and 1700s. And then you have these businesses who just don't care. So how can you incorporate it into the business models? And I'll stop for now. Thank you, Sadaf, for inviting me.
That's brilliant, Jessica. Richard, yes, any questions from Jessica? Because she's very passionate. We have been in touch. She was part of the SDG Silk Road Summit that we conducted. We even tried to, Jessica, remember we sent some handicrafts from Pakistan promoting, and she was very kind enough to share it. And she still has, I think, what she's trying to show. So, Collins, I want you to ask Jessica. Collins is joining us all the way from Nairobi, Kenya. That's truck art mark Jessica is showing. What you want to ask from Jessica, what she just mentioned? Yes, Collins.
Hi, Jessica. Interesting insight from what you just shared and the ESG concept. Maybe from your experience, if you're working with the companies, what has been the dilemma around maybe social targets, and then we have these economic targets? How does that play around, especially when it comes to accountability for that, in terms of how they pick out on how accountable they are with their processes? And then number two will be maybe from your teaching experience and the young people, whether this is a concept you think like the young people are picking it up even from their business models, especially with regards to now the digital era, especially those young companies that are actually in the IT industry, and how that can also either help or actually give information with regards to what we just said.
Nice to meet you, Sir Collins.
Thank you.
There's zero accountability, and that's why I said that ESG and CSR didn't work. No one cares. I mean, we care, and the environmentalists care, and the business people just don't. And they're completely siloed. And so that's why I say, how can we catch the interest of businesses without just being inflammatory? And I think the image of an environmentalist throwing tomato sauce on a painting, it's a good metaphor, because that's all that's happening over here. And so there's no accountability. I'm not really sure how to answer the one about the information age, or digital you know, things. I'm not sure I understood that question, Sir Collins. If you can use other words maybe to help me.
Okay. Basically, I wanted to know from the tech perspective, because as companies innovate using the technological innovations, does that in a way has helped, or we still like in sort of we are not making steps into that?
Yeah, I don't see anything, and I'm not an expert in all of this. I'm not looking at everything. So there could be companies out there that are doing these things. But when we talk about, you mentioned innovation, and that reminds me of a statement from the director of social entrepreneurship at Babson College, which is a business school. And she said students come to Babson to make money. Like they're studying business. It's only a business school. And so people don't care so much about her initiatives. And she had a couple pieces of advice. And the first one is to integrate any initiative into the business model. And let me give you an opposite example of something that's not social entrepreneurship. People talk about Bombas socks all the time. And Bombas is a sock company. And every time you buy a pair of their socks, they donate a pair of socks. That's not social entrepreneurship, and that's not changing anything. It's nice. You know, they're giving back to their community, but it has nothing to do with creating anything that's self-sustaining. When we talk about self-sustaining models, you know, that's why I talk about a hotel that's already paying money for clean water. There is a way to incentivize them to change their habits to filtration products. There's a group, and switching, it may sound like I'm switching gears, but wait until the end. I'm not really. My department, when I was at Miami University, we helped some consultants from Strathmore in Kenya. They were tasked with helping nuns to move from the donor-based model, which is, I know that you know what the donor-based model is, but you know, to help bring it home to the viewers, people like nuns perceive themselves to be able to stand there and say, give me money for my mission. And then they go back and they use that money. And then 1 month later, give me more money. And it's just, you just keep giving money. And we know that model just didn't work. A lot of money went into with good intentions, and you know, a lot of countries are the same as they were 20 years ago. The idea of developing nations is almost a misnomer, which really makes me mad and drives my passion. Sadaf was saying that, so if we move them to a donor-based model, a self-sustaining model, and to give you some examples, the Trappist monks in Belgium make the world's best beer, and they don't apologize for that. We are monks, and this is how we live. Like, we make this beer, and it is the best in the world. And that's how we live, and we sustain ourselves in that way. And moving back to the nuns in Kenya, we helped them. Like, one nun actually owned a hotel, and out of the 80 rooms, she only ever had like 4 booked, because she didn't perceive herself to be in the position to hire an accountant, a marketer, a maid, somebody to work at the front desk. And we showed her some models where this is happening in other countries in Africa. I can't remember the details right now of where they were, but it's happening in other countries too. If you frame this hotel as a respite from the chaos of the world, then it's okay that she has this hotel. and you put a Bible in every hotel room, and it becomes like a safe place of respite. And the last video I saw when they went back, literally these nuns were dancing, and I can say never in my life of 29 years plus have I seen nuns dancing, but they were dancing because they really understood that they are allowed to be self-sustaining. And I'll stop there for now. But if we're gonna have any rubber to meet the road, to use that analogy, it has to be integrated into the business model. Thanks.
Exactly. Jessica, thanks for your insight. And Richard, before we wrap our session, thank you, Jessica, once again for joining, because I know you're busy, and I did invite you to, to speak at this global campaign, because I want, like, there's so many wonderful stories, because I'm a woman entrepreneur myself. I want your story to be heard globally, which you're contributing, you're passionate about. I can see that. Yes, Richard, your last question for Jessica, and then we wrap the session for today.
I fear very much that my last question might be very, very long, unfortunately. But as a business school student, I do take on board the criticism. I think it goes very much to the root of the problem is essentially in the ESG moniker. I don't particularly care about the E and the S. All I care about is really the governance issue, because we are going to get the companies that we deserve as owners. And we need to think about what that really means, because most companies in the world are actually owned by all of us through our pension plans, through our collective saving schemes, etc. And until we figure out how you can exercise that governance, we're going to get stuck with companies that are effectively a gray zone, operating without the accountability that they should have towards their shareholders. We tend to think of Amazon as being Jeff Bezos' company. Well, Jeff Bezos owns less than 10% of Amazon. 90% of Amazon is owned by people like us through our pension plans. And I think Amazon is a fantastic company, but they're involved in practices I don't really care very much for. I don't need same-day delivery. I don't need a bunch of vans clogging up the road, Unless these vans are delivering my book, I don't think it's that urgent for them to get out. So we need to get to the point where the governance aspect is going to the forefront of all these issues, because we're going to get stuck with the companies that we deserve as owners, because we haven't exercised our responsibility, right, and actual duty to shape them the way we want them to operate. And unfortunately, our time is up. But Jessica, I'm absolutely intrigued by your work and your views, because you sound like an eminent voice of reason in all this crazy world around us, and how we want to shape companies to operate the way we want them to operate. And the way we need to use the tools needs to be economic. It always goes back to the economy, which you described. The donor model doesn't work for the nuns. They need to figure out how they're going to sustain their own livelihoods in the face of what we're dealing with. So if possible, we would absolutely love to have you back on this, if there is a tiny space in your busy calendar, because we have so much to debate, I sense.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm glad you found value in what I had to say.
I share your concerns and your frustrations with how things work, because I truly am a capitalist at heart, but we have started to distort the capitalist model in ways that was never intended to start with, and we need to actually recapture what capitalism means and work along those lines, not some distorted, weird form of crony capitalism.
Yeah, I think the title for the next one should be Corporate Capture, and what that has to do with what we're talking about today, but I don't want to go into another topic.
Then we schedule one, and
yeah, thank you so much, Jessica, to join us. Yes, Richard, go ahead. Thank you. I've woken you up at 7:30 or 8 in the morning, but thanks. It was a very casual. I mean, I don't want our campaign to be really perfect, but that's what informal discussions we're having. We are hearing voices from all across the globe. You're from US and Pakistan, Colin joining from Kenya, Richard is in UK. So it is a global campaign that we're running. It's for you. Thank you, Jessica, once again. The viewers are also sending me comments. They really liked, and they on demand, they're asking if you have time, we'll talk and we'll have a discussion with you. But thank you so much and keep up the amazing work and talk to you soon. Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you so much, everybody. We'll be back 7 o'clock Karachi time for our next session. Until then, thank you, Jessica, and thank you everyone else on the program. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.